Oh, okay.
So we'll get started, please, Matua.
All right.
Karakia.
Hoi no mua tonu mai tō tātou karakia. Ai tika ana no hoki me mihiat. Ki tō tātou kauni he rā arohe. O te matau o Māori, na kai hoki tātou te rōpū Māori. Hoi ke mai ki runga te karanga o te kaupapa mo tēnei rā. Rere pieri, koutou ma. Me tō tātou he mana ki hoi hoki Michelle. E hoi hoki te pōtai mō tātou i tēnei rā mō tō tātou komite no nere kānu hoki ngā mihi. Kāre kore me mihi atu ki tō tātou pāpā atu wire mu Blake. Ko kei te karawa kore haere ki tō tātou pāpā engari tōna kahata hara mai. E te rā nei, hei āpina tia hoki ngā kaupapa. Kei te whakamahingi hoki rātou i roto ki tō airo. Ruho nenga mātangi rau. Taino ki roto ki māhia mai tawhiti. No reira, me ngā tai whenua, koutou ngā me mō ngā tai whenua ko eke mai. Kāre kore me mihi atu ki o koutou. Me mihi atu anohu ki ngā tini aitua. Ko rātou māko riro atu. I roto ki te ringa pūmautanga o tō tātou kaihanga. Whakai tuingi hoki rātou no reire ngā mate haere. Haere tunu koutou o te rāki a tāpiri mai tunu koutou ki te taho te hurua. O rātou mākai reire ki e karanga hea o ki mō koutou. Ko tātou hoki tēnei te hungo e pai nei huri noa. Huri no tō tātou tari tēnā koutou, Kia ora hoki tātou katoa. I noa hoki tātou. I te māngai me ngāna hera pona te tūkatu te tapu. Kia tātou mai nei koutou ki wāinu tēnei whakamoimiti o mātou. Hei tātari katoa hoki ngā kupu. I whakapua ke ne mātou e roto ki tō koutou kororiatanga. Ko tēnei hoki te tīmatanga me te whakaotinga. Mai o mātou e tūmanako tēnei roto ki tō koutou kororiatanga. Ko koe ena hoki te māngai hei tō ko mai. Ai nei a kene a. I te māngai me ngāna hera pona te tōkatu te tapu. Whakaungi mātou ne mātou ki roto ki te aroha noa. Anei ra hoki mātou o pōnanga ko tai ki mua tō koutou aro i tēnei rā. Tukuna mai tō koutou manakitanga ki ungi tō tātou komiti Māori e pāna hoki ki te kauni he rārohe. Mo te matau a Māori tēnei rā. Ke haere pai katoa ki te kaupapa. Me kai reira ki ngā tau mahatanga ngā iti noe. Mā tātou ki e pai ak. Me whakatike ke tikangi e hoki ngā kaupapa. Kei mui a tātou i tēnei wā. No re te māngai me ngāna hera pona te tokatu te tapu. Whakaungi o mai tonu mātou ki roto ki te aroha noa. Pai here te tonu mātou. Ki roto ki te rangi Māori ngā wā katoa. Ko koe no ki te māngai hei tau te ko mai. Ai nei, āka nei, ai. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora tātou. Kia ora.
Kia ora matua hame.
Tēnā koe chair. E iti kōrero tēnei ki te mihi kia koe rā anku. Nau ni whakaritea tātou he ngai e te ara whatakairunga. Hoi anō e nā e matakanohi mai me ki rā tātou te huhinga tangata. Tēnei te mihi kia koe. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora peri.
Kia ora peri. Nā mahi o te tauhau kia. Anō, e ngā rangatira for our hui today, and I'd just like to have a special mention to our late and special friend Joella Brown and all her work in the taiao. Especially for Wairo, she came through to us and advised us around the inanga, the spawning sites, and even when she was Māwiwi, I was asking her about asking advice on two of our estuaries there, spawning sites, and yeah, she'll be greatly missed. All that mātauranga. And she was just a lovely wahine. Opposed to me, whānau, you know. That's what you aspire to be. Yeah.
Kia ora.
So very rangi Māori and Ngāwari.
Ka nui ora. Kia ora.
Mai rā. So I will move on to our any notices. Anybody leaving early or anything like that? Oh. Okay, apologies. Now I see Māori and Katarina. Kia ora, Katarina. He'll be popping in and out. I will mention that Katarina might pop in and out because there's a tangi on at Rangiahua, marae. So, ka roha te ao whānau tāhuri, me ngā tīpuna whānau out there, and yeah, to Rose Ma. It's his aroha rangatira.
Apologies for Zach.
Zach, yes. I was looking around the room while we were having karakia, so he was missing Zach. So apologies from Zach Makuare, and I think he's the only one missing today, eh? That's of our team. Rick's online. Rick is online. Rick and Katarina and Māori. Māori's the axi, Māori. So really, I'm right at the other end, so it's really, you're going to have to wave at me. Now I understand that's how difficult it is. So that's Zach, and that's it. So I'm going to have someone to move the apologies, please. Moved by Mike, seconded by Hinewai. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Okay, go on to next one is conflict of interest declarations. We're all conflicted. We're whananga.
Just in the item around conflicts of interest, I might have a conflict of interest.
So we'll move on from there. Okay then, an alternate member for, so we haven't got anybody for Tamatea? Alternate member for Tamatea today? Carl? Okay then, we don't have any alternate member.
And just on that, maybe we may need to look at that, an alternative member. I just want to put that in because Zach is a busy person, and then if we, maybe his opportunity, if he's unable to attend, we can have an alternative come in for it.
True. And then there's the limitations and space too with
Oh yeah, but Zach's, I think he's only going to come to one meeting, so.
Yeah, we'll leave it at, we'll pass that, leave that one with Tamatea. Kia ora. And noted, confirmation of minutes from the 3rd of November 2021. And the amendments, deletions, additions. Don't have me. Someone want to move the minutes? Who was present? Moved by Paula, seconded by Mike. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Okay, okay. Takieri puata takiwa. So we've allocated 5 minutes per takiwa. So, geez, he says. Shall we start up with, we'll start from the north going south, so we'll start with Te Wairo. Mine was short. Katarina might have something to add. The only query I had around was the leachate at Carter Holt's in Wairo for tantalised timber. So I understand as part of their resource consent they have to get the water tested because it's so close to the stream. Now I spoke about spawning streams earlier. That's a spawning stream. And our whānau at Taihoa, they still practice mahinga kai in that over there. So there's a bit of a concern with the levels of metals leaching from that property. And so I just wanted the action in mind to follow up about what are those. Okay, Katarina, you got anything to add?
Just to add, just before Christmas, our AFCO Metworks oxidation pond emptied out. Unfortunately, and we weren't told directly, we saw it indirectly. So just to let you know that we were aware that the ponds were really high because of the overproduction. However, we never received any kind of notice from AFCO. And maybe our kind of street community eyes and ears, and we were told. And we went back the next day, it was all gone. The whole pond was empty. So I hope someone can answer that today sometime. And one other thing is that it's really awesome to see the bar, the attempt for the Wairau bar to be opened. Been a lot of conversations and a lot of community watching. And just before the tsunami alert from Tonga, I could see that some of our workers were working pretty hard and fast out there. So I was out there observing and watching and sort of fielding some answers to a few people that didn't know anything. That's about all for now.
Just a question.
One more thing, swimmability in Wairoa. So there's a couple of spots in Wairoa that are well-frequented swimming spots, one being the Homely River, or the Homely swimming spot on the Waio. That's just south of the Callahurst sort of H-brick testing site. Next to my marae, Rangiahua, in between Rangiahua marae and Arimawha marae is the awesome swimming spot. It's been blocked by a whole lot of kind of 3 or 4 big long trees, and I see hopefully maybe the Works Essex team could come and have an assessment. Here's a picture of the back. That's where I'm talking about. So there's a whole lot of trees all slanting in here, and this is the most safest place for our children and our people to swim. That's different from Wairoa Township, and yeah, this is coming from Waikaremoana. I swam in it yesterday. I took the kids from the marae down there. That was my job. Keep calm on the marae. I took a couple of van loads down to the awa, cooled them down, get them out of everyone's gear. And when I was in the water, it was between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They weren't eels, but things were slipping past me. I was thinking, oh, what was that? So I asked the kids, go for a little dive under there and pick up what you can find. And they were picking up long, hairy pythons. Looks like lettuce, algae, a lot of it. So we threw some samples out and we put it out and we took it back to the marae and say, Whānau, look what's happened to our awa. Geez, it's not been like this for a long time. So I'd like to see some monitoring. So that's me from Wairoa.
Kia ora, Katarina.
I just got a question in regards to leachate, with Kara Hawke's and the thing. So there's a process, say, to go through that regional council does to go through that. And I suppose we had an example in Ahuriri, I don't know, 20 years ago when Carter's had the processing plant here in Onikawa, and that because all the ground and the contamination left in the soil. So it'll be interesting to see what the clean-up process is, because it's by the awa, and obviously we've got 3 waters coming in. So, yeah, I don't know where you're heading with that, but because you've raised it, and because of working in that area, and the regional council's got a responsibility to work in that area, I suppose it'd be good just to see where that goes.
I think they must be reporting to the council because there's monitoring going on.
Okay, yeah.
So I just wanted to know what the results of that were. Yeah, no, good, thank you.
Just because you raised it in your report, and I think it's good to support your corridor, and then how do you clean the soil? Because I know we had, someone had a spill in there to take it all out and put it in a big furnace and burn it. So yeah, so we're just interested what the outcome is.
Yeah, I understand the best way to get rid of it is to have to dig the soil out, the contaminated soil, instead of leaving it stay there. Kia ora. So now on to...
One point on your report, Chair, just to congratulate you on your re-election for a further 3-year term, as indicated in your report.
Things, eh? Thank you. Kia ora, Piri. And kia ora, James. So we just got notice lateness. It's all right now. So next one is Whanganui Rotu. Since you started, Peter.
I was going to figure it up here then. You want me to do it up here? Yes. Okay, we'll just brief through. You sort of read the report. And yeah, just a big welcome back to everybody. Obviously a busy year coming up. We've got COVID, we've got Omicron, we've got a whole lot of challenges before us. Just a big mihi to everyone back, to obviously around the table, and to regional council staff and that. Good luck for your new year. And you just covered off some points where our first meeting a few weeks ago, and then we followed up from our meeting that we had with the RPC and the Māori Standing Committee and the Tai Whenua Api. Endorsed, do you want to?
No.
Yep. So we endorsed the kōrero that we had with the 2 collective committees to look at a collective taiao group. So the Tai Whenua was in support of the framework. Obviously there's going to be a bit more work, we said, but they've agreed to support the motion that was put on the tepu about how we frame that committee up, and then we said we'll report back with the nuts and bolts stuff at a later stage. Just so you're all aware, because I know that was a big kōrero. It's been a day in here discussing it. So they were fine with us to move ahead, so they've got the support. And we just talked about, we do our annual Kotahi dive we've done for the last 5 years and just getting mussels off the reef of Pānia. What comment we did have, they around the colour of the mussel now, because they used to be a white, healthy looking colour, and some of our whānau noticed a change in the colour of the Kotahi. So we don't know if that's due to, because obviously there's a lot of work going on at the port and there's silt being dumped on the seaward side of Pānia. We don't know if that's a direct result of that, but that's just anecdotal when people see and they've tasted those Kotahi for the last 5-6 years and they say, oh, that looked a little bit different or tasted a little bit different. So and potentially we'll feed that back to the port committee and say, hey, some of our whānau have noticed a change in the Kotahi on Pānia, so may not be reflected to that, but I thought I'd raise it because obviously that's observation that our whānau make. Hey, that's, whether it's mātauranga or fits into one of those boxes, it's good to be aware and noticing changes. Te rere a tāwhaki, we've purchased that. Our Jobs for Nature program's been cleaning that area up on Paraiti. I mentioned that in previous. So the Tai Whenua purchased the old pa site there, and very historical site. One of our chiefs lived there, and incantations, and there's a lot of whakapapa history about that. So the Tai Whenua's purchased that, and just working through the process on what the whenua was going to be used for. But it's always good to get back a historical site and then protect it so that it'll be protected forever and ever, basically. So we're just going through a process to manage that. The Green Hub Food Bank, some of you might have noticed next to MSD, there's what the Tai Whenua is leased the building called the Green Hub, and we're operating a food bank, and we're operating a Jobs for Nature program out of that facility. And obviously the Jobs for Nature program's in the Ahuriri estuary and doing mahi around there to clean up the estuary and around some of the old past sites again to do mahi around there. So it's a good project. I just mentioned about emergency response site. We just, as an example, as our marae's look at COVID, look at responses, how we work within the new framework now. Mōtio, we've got a container there, and we found through flooding and other different challenges that have hit the marae, when we send people out, it's about making sure they're equipped to do the job. So we're setting up a specific area to resource and get those whānau members that are called out or go out to help whānau to say, hey, have you got some wet weather gear, have you got a gumboot, and have you got a walkie-talkie so we can communicate, because when cell phone networks and that jam, so we're just working through a process to make us a bit more effective and efficient, and possibly something all of it, I don't know, we should be looking at, because we're first responders for our whānau, and then you want to make sure you equip your whānau adequately to do the mahi they're going to do. And that's just through the examples we've had through COVID and the flooding here in Napier. And that customary kaitiaki plan, again, that's another big ticket item. The Tai Whenua is discussing and Te Mata Māori's discussing as a customary, and it affects the coastal plan for, I suppose, the regional council, because we're talking about how we engage and how our kaitiaki work within the framework to provide kai moana, work in the moana, resourcing our marae. We've had a number of hui from mahi down in Wairarapa in regards to what does whānau see, or hapu iwi see as a point for them where they need support. So there's been a number of wānanga how to identify areas to see where we can put some support into to those communities. And it mostly does affect the coastal planning that sits here, because obviously those kaitaki are representative of that moana, and they gazetted through the Fisheries Act to work within that space.
Was that the customary book?
Yeah. Customary portfolio. So I know we had Paronga Ho come up, and he's been a Jim Hutch, is it? He's been around for like 20, 30 years. Yeah, he come up and he had a kōrero in regards to his and Kia Ora Ki Tai strategy that he done 20 years ago, I think, with Ngāti Kaununi. So he contributed to that, and obviously I think Jenny Major that was around at that stage, and they had done that, and then we had some other iwi leaders that were around that time that done that Key tie strategy, and yep, it may be fit for purpose because it's got some good kōrero in it, and then how do you use that moving forward in this era? So we're just looking at potentially the use of that document, and that was wānanga over 10 years, I think, at every marae on the East Coast. So it's a good document that potentially we could use or, yep.
Madam Chair, could I just add to that, Take? Parimahu, which is what we call a wreck at Porangahau, was basically plundered from New Year's to now. And plundered in the sense that in the road down there, which is rough as, I count one day with 90 utes, divers going in and out, ferrying paua, kina, and we now know that from the 4 metre to the 7 metre, all the pauas, all the kinas are gone, our nature bays were gone. To talk more seriously about kaitiaki and the essence of that, we've struggled with MPI and DOC in trying to implement some method of locals having a say, locals having some input, locals having some method of trying to care for. So we're going to learn again the hard way, and it's in line with this is big talk, and we're looking for ways through, if it's through council, if it's through our Māori aspect of councils, it doesn't matter. There's something needs to be done, and that's a good demonstration from Waimarama right down to Paurere, right down to Porangahau, and Porangahau got a dealing too. Ākitea got a dealing too. Huge take.
And just to,
I'll throw it in with you, Pete, because it just widens the net.
yeah. And just to add, I suppose, part of to your conversation, because there was restrictions put on at Waimarama, but that's some of the feedback we got from whānau. Well, people go to Waimarama, we get power, now they're going down to Haurere and going south.
Coming to the wreck.
So yeah, so that's the impact of putting, when you put on constraints on individuals, because they're still going to go out, but they just all moved down to Haurere and Rongohau Way. So I suppose just some learnings from that, and then maybe I'll see if I can get you invited to that next committee. Yeah. Well, I will. I'll put it in there and invite you, because that's what we're having from the board with fisheries. We wanted to get whānau feedback.
One carload was asked, where are you from? Oh, Tauranga. How did you get here? Oh, they told us that. They told us that. The word is that.
So the MPI committee, the Paul chair, you can loop them into the hui matua, and that's where all the kaitiaki, so they attend as well. So that's all from Mahia to
Wairarapa down, yeah.
My heart is asking for regional councils and councils to be interested in what's happening out there, and to put some muffy in behind whomever. And you talk about Jim, man. There's a man with his heart on his shoulder, trying his damnedest. We're trying to shut the road into the Paramo at the minute. And failing any authority, we'll put a big block of concrete in there.
I'll just refer to James, because I understand that's an MPI area, but get us put it all here.
Morena koutou.
Morning,
The chair's quite right that we have limited jurisdiction in this regard, given that it's primarily Ministry for Primary Industries, which isn't very satisfactory for anyone, particularly around this table, I appreciate. There's been a long-standing ambiguity in legislation, and that is that this council, the regional councils, are responsible for the management of the coastal marine area, including for biodiversity. So the health of our ecosystems on the coast are our responsibility, but we're not allowed to control fishing methods or activities. So how we're supposed to achieve our outcomes without those tools is anyone's guess. And as some of you might be aware, that was subject of the Mortiti claim that was taken through the High Court last year and found successfully found that regional councils could impose restrictions on fishing activity and fishing methods. That has yet to be really tried and tested properly in the courts yet, but it's something that through the Kotahi plan change we're keen to discuss with you how we, I guess, push the boundaries a bit on that. But obviously we want to work with our communities and particularly mana whenua about how that is undertaken and work with the Ministry for Primary Industries. As you know, under customary regulations, there are the taipuri mechanisms as well as mataitai, and so there are opportunities, I think, for us to strengthen the oversight of our coastal fisheries and, you know, involve more of our kaitiaki in that exercise with perhaps some improved powers, improved support from all of the agencies, including ourselves. So, look, I think it's a real problem. We are seeing some plundering of resource going on. So that's a conversation I'd encourage this committee to keep having, and us to work through the marine stream of Kotahi and our engagement with the Ministry for Primary Industries on these matters. I think we've just got to keep pushing it. It's difficult politically for government. The recreational fishing lobby is pretty powerful and pretty influential. And of course, the resources of DOC and MPI are pretty skinny compared to the vast coastline that we have. So the monitoring is a bit lax, but the opportunity, I think, is to work with the communities that live there so they can play a stronger role in terms of the compliance and enforcement. So look, just really appreciate the issue having been raised and keen to see how we can keep talking about what we can do to help.
Could I add a footnote quickly to that? I went to MPI and they want to do it through customary fishing and mātaitai and taipuri. It takes too long.
Yep.
There has to be a process when there's blatant, like I've just explained, we just got absolutely wiped out. And it needs someone to go down there and see it, understand it, right, we have to do something. It takes too long, this other process. It can go into a long-term plan or whatever you want to call it. But we need to look, and these are the groups that might be able to put those things in place. MPI tells me they can't. Well, they're right up against the fishing industry. But we're back a wee bit from it, and you're looking at what is a constructive thing for a big hapu, big mana whenua, big all people.
Yes.
Kia ora.
And maybe as an action point, we could invite Paul Ratapu chairs the customary kaitiaki board.
Mai pariti tai atu ki Raki Rai, Fisheries Forum.
We could put him on an agenda to do a 15-minute presentation in regards to what we do, and then I co-chair Te Mata Maui, which is from Cape Kidnappers, from Pānia out 200 nautical miles. So me and Jenny Major, so we chair for Hiratonga and Ahuriri. I co-chair the Kaitiaki Ropu. And what you're saying, Matua, we support the corridor.
And that's probably the avenue, Matua. That's where he's going, because you need those customary fisheries officers, and then they have delegations to go down there.
But maybe if we have a 15-minute hui and we bring in Paul to talk about the ropu, and then potentially we could look at how we build our relationship. We've got a relationship ourselves in this meeting, but hence we can build a relationship to make sure we address our concerns for our tai whenua within the moana and put some process in place.
Exactly.
Yeah, we could talk to Paul, could they just put a padlock on their gate?
Yeah.
On their road.
So mahea, so there's the same problems happening. I think they reseeded a whole lot of kutai and Ōpautama, and they were wiped out in the summer. So the mahea is having the same problem. Papa Bill can tell you they're all, the little powers are getting taken. Stop and say,
we found that around
Poranga. But, they don't believe in conservation.
need to be...
My
only other point with that, and then how does that build into the coastal strategy plan that's been developed with our kaitiaki, because obviously our kaitiaki do a role, and they're designated and they're mandated under the Fisheries Act. So in the process, the government's supporting that, or MPI and that's supporting, the minister's supporting that, then how can that work with the regional council's wider role in the coastal development strategy
It's
plan?
about working together, eh?
So maybe there's a link
the coastline.
there. Yes, I just thought I'd point that out. Cool. So just moving on, just acknowledging, we acknowledged James as well at the meeting in regards to the comment that was made at our last one of the street meetings at the East Fair about that procurement for Māori and how that's going to be developed into the plan in 2022. So the Tai Whenua said, just want to acknowledge that step taken by the regional council to work in that space, because that's great and always good to acknowledge great work. And that's acknowledging James and your team. Around the pest management planning, obviously that we discussed that. We had a segment on that around pest management, and because that affects a lot of Māori land.
We are here to stay and we belong here. We're not going anywhere at all.
Go, Charlie.
I'll
be there, Charlie.
Your workout.
So just in that pest management.
By Māori.
Pest management strategy moving forward, a lot of our ahu whenua blocks that are situated in Hastings District Council and the Regional Council area on the awa have said, hey, we've got a big interest because obviously our land is a lot of Indigenous whenua that obviously have pests on it, and obviously any management plan that's going to come into place, how is it going to affect them? So I'm talking about pahuwera, talking about all those ahu whenua trusts. So they were quite interested in that conversation when we get to that stage. And I think that's about me. Uppy and Rose, if you wanted to add anything that I might have missed.
Rose?
All good. We have our huis with Peter when we draw up our report, so yeah.
And one other point, sorry, and it's on our agenda around spatial planning and that, because obviously we had that with Tai Whenua, obviously we engaged with Napier City Council on the development. We've got, is it Prebenson Drive that we're involved or having conversations around, and with some other developers around what's happening. So to be interested in that conversation around that planning, and the point we raised, or one of the points we raised in the meeting, was around infrastructure, because all these housing developments are going up, but how's the infrastructure going to meet if the current demand's not meeting the need, then are we at risk of creating an environmental nightmare or disaster in the future if we haven't got capacity? So I suppose that's a question we'd put to regional council, because they manage that process, and we're talking about 200-300 homes, we're talking about the mission development, all these developments. So some concerns around infrastructure. So that may come into a bigger conversation. That's me, no mate.
You right, Uppy?
Yeah, it's all good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's whanua rotu, and we'll go on to Heretanga. Mare?
Yoda, can you hear me? Oh well, tuatahi tēnei te mihi ati ki a koe te pāpā hāmi, nau I te pāwhakawaire timatai, tā tātou nei hui te kaunihira a te mata Māui. Kōrewa hoki ki a koe pāpā, Papa Bill, e mihi kawaki ki a koe hoki. I guess I've got a short report too as well, but it doesn't take away the busy nature. I think that's incumbent upon the impacts that we're all having to try and get not only our heads around, particularly with IT Whero, the traffic light system, and how that impacts on each and every one of us, both personally and of course the way by which having to put the necessary controls, infectious controls management, it's going to be ever so important. So having to sit away from this as a part of that kind of space of kind of adding a further layer of protection. The mode of our mahi seems to be going more towards sui hui a kanohi. So mihi kawake ko koutou ki te hara ki tēnei, I tēnei wā. Tonu, te matai me te gai a koe Michelle tēnei tauhau, Pākehā, because there's a lot of mahi in front of us. Secondly, I just want to just say that my report was really a contribution to add on, as it has outlined. I hope a continuum of where I guess as a relationship and it's bound by the treaty principles, that there's an extension of how we can best improve that relationship with each other. And I've provided a couple of links that start to dig into the very nature of decolonisation. I don't use that as a way by which to create any separation, but more of having to look at ways, processes as we're going into an enduring relationship that these sorts of acknowledgement that are taking place around the world. I won't go too much into those two links. They're there for your own uptake. So there they are. I just want to say that most of the work that in my space has been, particularly from toward the end of last year and heading into the start of this year, being under the pump with a number of different mahi that's coming out of our district council. In my previous report did outline that we are currently in mediation, and certainly that's going to be playing itself out over the Plan Change 9, is it? Outstanding water bodies scenario, and of course the global consent, of which some timeframes have only just started to arrive in the last day or so. Apart from that, I think just wanted to say that I might be taken out at about 1 o'clock. The day is, and this is probably a good thing too as well, having to come online. I've had hui dovetailed throughout the extent of today, as it will go into this afternoon. Just put my apology in if hui is coming pretty close to ending. I'll be seeking leave around about that time. I'm just shortly after lunch to go into another important meeting, and that's to do with the success of Te Manaroti Wai freshwater application that MFE have got to have confirmed. I'm quite excited about that. The discussion that I will be talking through today is with MSD. We were part of the original applicants submitting for the Jobs for Nature, and it's good to hear from those around the table how well that seems to have fitted into the normal business as usual, particularly for you, Ahiriri, Te Whanganui Arotu, and of course your location and having those folk around. So ngāmihi. We too are looking to get through some hoops in terms of the recruitment of Nike Kaimahi. There has to be in some ways a relationship for each of ourselves in terms of the regional council and how the vision of this particular project blends in and is able to contribute towards, which was its intent anyway, towards the state of the environment. You know, I actually read the reports, the state of the Takiwā reports, and I've just forgotten her name, but she puts quite a cheerful chirp to her reports over the state of the environment, and of course the monthly monitoring that's been undertaken. So our contribution, and I hope that we'll need to have some conversations with Ian Maxwell, his team, and what then will be the rollout to this to meet each other's own expectations. That's my fervent hope. So that's my report from me. Mike, you may want to add anything further. Kia ora.
Tēnā rā koutou rami kia koutou mō te tautoko te koroi tīma o tēnei hau. So just further to that, Heretanga Tai Whenua wishes to support the efforts of those who are wanting to retain the open speed limit on State Highway 5 between Ahuriri through to our northern area of State Highway 5. That we don't support the reduction of the speed limit from 100 back down to 80. We believe that it actually would just add to the safety concerns. We do believe that it does the road. I can still remember when the road was originally done up underneath the term of Muldoon, who's put in a significant amount of money to upgrade that road way back in the 70s, and we saw, the quality of the road was lifted. And what we have seen certainly over the last 10 years is a degradation to the quality of that road and the maintenance and the safety, improving the safety of that particular piece of highway, and also around policing. As I said prior to the committee meeting today, is I can go to Paharakeke Marae Nui and see enormous amounts of policing in regards to health and safety, speeding around there. But when you go out onto the main highway, we don't actually see that anymore. So I think it is returning back to those values will achieve what is we wanted to achieve, which is the reduction of fatalities and accidents along that piece of road. So Taiwhenua Heretaunga support the continuation of the current 100-kilometre limit on the road. So if we are unable to make the special transport meeting tomorrow and support those efforts, just wanted to have it recorded. Kia ora tata. Other than that, nothing further from Heretaunga. Thank you.
And maybe we should mention that too, because Te Whanganui Rotu support that, and that's within our area, and we've talked to whānau that live up on that road as well, on that state highway, that have driven that for all their lives, and they said, hey, we don't want to see the reduction, and they said it's around behaviour and education. No, they just said it's not about the 100k limit. So sorry, I thought I
I was going to put it on the end of our items, but it was Api was asked by Martin to bring back some feedback from our committee, and there's sort of a general consensus. We did discuss it pre-hui, that want to keep it at the 100. Maintenance, there's a common theme here, maintenance. One thing also brought up was the modern cars. Now you sort of don't notice the speed, whereas back in the day you did. And so there would be a tendency to go over, but it's about their own being safe drivers as well. What was the other thing we put? There were a few comments we had. Policing, which Mike brought up, and passing lanes, maintenance, the distance involved. You've got those streets they're quite boring, and that's where all the accidents tend to happen. It's about us being safe drivers, really. There was another thing. Also wanting to know if they could bring forward the statistics on with the fatalities and injuries on that road, how many of them are tangata whenua, or the age ranges, things like that. See how it impacts our people as well. And it was good to hear from Peter, because you've got the Hinuri people, and so we all use that road regularly. The worst one is the Wairau Road. So Taupō's straight compared to our road. So so something for you to take forward. Is that all right? Then I don't have to put it on the end.
Yes,
do you want to comment,
yes,
Api?
Kia ora, Michelle. We were fortunate to have a discussion early this morning, and the main concerns there's going to be more frustration if the speed limit does come down, and of course this leads to people being impatient, and so we believe there'll be more fatalities on that road if we go along with the decrease in the speed limit. So I'm pleased to say at this stage that our members present today have endorsed the idea that we will not support the decrease in the speed limit at the special meeting being held tomorrow. So kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora. That was Heretaunga, so we go to Tamatea. What's up?
E te tepu, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou i ngā huatanga o te wā. Kui no ki ngā mihi. O te tāhau ki a te koutou katoa. I te pāpā hāmi, ki a koe. Tō mātou pau. So the our report is not a written one. We have fairly limited resources. It just takes an illness or something for people to stay away and be away, and we're a bunch of volunteers that come together, so we don't have an ongoing infrastructure that can produce reports at will. However, having said that, we'll just keep working on improving that. And I'll preface my remarks with the fact that, like everybody else, we're inundated with the COVID response. So all our resources, people resources, material resources are gearing up, and that's taking up sort of 95% of our energies and direction. Having said that, we realise the world goes on and these other issues have to be dealt with, and so we're dealing with them in the site. So first of all, we had our board meeting on Monday and fully support the direction of the kōrero about a mana taiao group forming with regional council and regional planning committee and Māori committee, and that progressing that agenda. And that spins off into something that we had put in motion before, is that our own Tamatea Mana Taiao group, simply because the taiao issues, including consents, which we've already had a round on today, is too big for the business of the board. And unless you've got people with some specialised knowledge, you don't have a proper discussion, debate about it. So we're pulling together a group of interested people who are not members of the board, but our relations covering the different marae, and we've got about 7 or 8 of them. And we're asking them to come together to form this mana taiao group for us. Hopefully that will develop into something by which we, the older ones and the board members, can just refer to them and say, you have a look at this thing here, this development or this proposal, and come back to us and advise us when we get into our debates. So that's just started. I would think it'll take about 3 or 4 months to kick into action and become a working group, but they're keen. They want to do this, and also we want to tap some of our younger ones that are at universities with this higher level of education in resource management and ecology and stuff like that. So sort of watch the space, I guess, as we develop this Tamatea Mana Taiao group. And it parallels what we talked about as a group in our aspirations to have a concentration of expertise on that. And also that does lead us to the, some of the conversations you just had about the coastal, and Paul has told you the latest update of Porongahau and Paremahu. And that raises this question that James brought about the ambiguity of the responsibility level at government level, and that impacts on our coastal hapu. It also raised a question for all of us in that the tai whenua boundaries and that don't count in this case because we're talking about the coastline. And so we haven't geared up to operating in that particular way, that the coastal groups can talk about their immediate concerns, and maybe something that's the Māori Committee in the future, maybe the Māori Caucus, the Regional Planning Committee, are going to have to give some thought to. Because when we talk about Te Taiao, we're normally talking about inland and the rivers, etc. And the coast is a separate conversation all of its own. And so we're raising that because Peter and Paul raised this now, and James responded. So I think there's a whole area of discussion there about the coast and its care. Yeah.
So our focus probably been
It's
around
a
freshwater
huge,
more
yeah.
the way.
something for the coming year for us to think about how we deal with it. The Whatuma, our lake, Whatuma, there's a feasibility study in progress to look at a Mātauranga Māori centre there to look at the management of inland waterways, a tangata whenua-led education centre, and that's our aspiration there. And through my previous employment, to link to other Indigenous groups across the world, because there are groups that I know in Canada and the States and in Australia who are dealing with these things in their own way about inland. This is different from the coast. This is the inland waters. So that's in progress, and we hope to have a concept plan and a feasibility study done within the next 6 weeks. Another one that's not our direct responsibility, but we're tied up with it intimately because we provide the support, and that's the Moriora program for the Ruahine Rangers, and the pest eradication and the training of people, which when I looked at the overall report from the regional council, talking about the Kaitiaki Ranger training, and Peter put in his one about that, I think there again there's a chance to come together to talk, or to, our aspiration is to have a cohort of people with expertise in managing pests, both plant pests and animal pests, and also in the area of planting and propagation of native plants. So that comes under this Māori oho at this stage, but it, again, a developing area where I see other tai whero and other groups are doing it. There may be time to start talking about how we can come together on those things.
And just to add to that, so Jobs for Nature, and Mare mentioned it as well. Obviously, we've got Te Whanganui Rotu, we've got another trust at the back of the Mohaka that may be getting a Jobs for Nature project. It's in discussions at the moment. So when we look at the Ruahine, we look at the Ahi Manawa, we look at the Kaimanawa range and all those water catchments associated. For Māori, we may have work teams working in that area, so it makes sense. How do we collectivise and then work with the regional council as well to implement some of those projects that need to be implemented within those upper catchment areas, because we're going to be working up there, but how do we make the most of the resource that we may have as well, and as a collective approach. So total cool, what you're saying. Yep. And all this is meant to happen over the next I don't know, 3 to 4 months, I think. Those programs potentially may get approved, or they might have letters of intent to approve those new programs. So it'll be kicking off, and everyone's doing their work schedules and what they're going to do. So it'll be good to have a meeting with the council to say, right, this is what we're going to be doing in our locations. How can we work collectively? I think that's and make it happen. Because I know I'm potentially writing up a work plan right now to say what we're going to do, and then maybe good to have a conversation with regional council and Roger and Mare and then Te Whanganui Rotu, and let's collectivise to do some planning. If it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? So, somewhere we need to go.
Just before teacher wants to ask a question, I think.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. Just reflecting back on this kōrero around employment in our tile, maybe, James, you can share with us some sort of successful partnerships you've had so far in that space, and the procurement process, the tendering process, that will enable mahi like this to grow and continue into the future. Could you talk to us about that, please?
So, Chair, that was going to be in the follow-up items, and we have Mr. Heaney, who's our procurement lead here, to talk to that as well. So we can either do that now, if that's your preference, or we can save it to the follow-up items.
Wait till then.
That's all right?
Yep. Thank you.
Was it any matua paora?
Oh, wait, I haven't finished yet.
Not
So,
finished, sorry.
I'll just say you finished with that, Taki.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it. Okay. There's quite extensive infrastructure water work going on in the Waipukaro, Waipao, Tāne corridor. on water supply, and the marae there, Whātua Apiti, Te Paeroa, Motueka, are heavily involved with District Council about that proposition, and that's an ongoing conversation that's going on locally in Tamatea. There's also talk and quite a deal of frustration about the lack of advancement of housing development, and again we get to water infrastructure and that supports that. So it's come to a bit of a halt at the moment, and so there's quite a bit of impatience locally, and it includes all the hapu and marae interests about getting that thing moving again.
And just add to that, because TBK's made a release and it's public statement, so I'm not saying anything, because the fund's cut, they get no money, and then we've got all these papakainga on our whenua that everyone wants the housing shortage, and Māori have whenua, and yet they can't access the resource, maybe the budget's not set. So if you're looking for a meaningful response and engagement with Māori, well, the budget needs to be increased so we can build more whare on our whenua. And I can give an example, Mōtio, hey, we can put 20 homes around that area, and Kaumātua flats, but the infrastructure costs. So I just highlight what Roger's saying, because it's right to say something. We've got a housing shortage, and Māori can provide some of the solutions with that. But it's no good when you get a message from TPK saying that there's no money left in the pūtea, so all those developments are put on hold, so there's no infrastructure costs available. So yeah, I just got to highlight that, because there's a solution, and there's a shortage of land within Hawke's Bay. But then Māori had land available for papakainga, and 54% I think of those people in hotels, motels that are living within our region are Māori that whakapapa back to that whenua, so it's a solution. So yep, sometimes, I'm not complaining, I'm saying sometimes talk is cheap, and when you've got a solution to a problem, you look at how do you implement the solution. So just putting that through.
Does Regional Council have some advice that we can take out and talk to the water at the hapu, or is something exciting to take and hope for the future?
Through you, Chair, with respect to papakainga?
With respect to what Peter is just talking about, the TPK can't access the money. We've got all of the assets and ready to go, but we're not write something to make it tick, click.
So can I just check, are you specifically talking about the water? You were talking about the water?
I was talking about the fact that it's one of the take in front of us at home, as this is a taiwhenua report, so a number of our whānau and landowners are concerned about the stalling of it. So that's all I wanted to make. I didn't ask for any action, I'm just saying it's one of the concerns, and it links to the water supply and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Look, certainly through you, Chair, we're aware of the issues, both the opportunity for a significant expansion in papakainga within the rohi, with a significant amount of benefits, both in terms of housing supply, but also wider cultural benefits. We're not sort of at the forefront of that work, so the district councils very much are, and we've been in discussions with the Hastings District Council and Napier City around those issues. They are, I guess, better placed than we are, given that land supply, housing development, associated infrastructure is more their responsibility. But certainly, our intention, and it has been through the tank plan change, for example, is to create as much enabling policy, particularly around the provision of fresh water for papakainga expansion. So we'll continue to support in whatever ways we can, but we just don't have a strong leadership role in that regard.
I think also just I'm just thinking about Waihoki and Waihoki, and your papakainga is more close together, whereas the whānaus at Pinta, the Pene whānau, their one is more it's spread out because it was around the resource consent and the septic tanks, because there's no sewage line there, even though there's all those houses going up. So the difference between Henewai's whānau's papakainga and this one is you've got a vast amount of land and they could only fit a limited amount of houses. So there was limitations. There are limitations, and that's connected to regional council, because I remember asking Paul to share about that. Are you having that problem about Mōtio?
Yeah, and we're at the planning stage, so we're just going through doing some planning in that. But I suppose just to give an idea on volume, we've got potential for the whānau. We've got potential for a new suburb to be created with the amount of whenua we've got up in that location around the marae, and potentially 10. We've got a project 10 homes. The marae's looking at Kaumātua flats as well. Then the marae's got land behind that we've got back. So, potentially it's a big project, but then, like you see, around the infrastructure and getting it over the line, how do you, it's a solution to a problem, and then we want to just see our whānau like anyone housed in, good housing, and support them, and like the village, the model, and then those, because you build the whare, but it's those internal services and all that to support vulnerable families. That's what we want to develop. But we're looking at 50. If everyone as a collective, 50 homes plus, which is a big. When you look at 50 homes, it's over 200 people, four people per home, and a lot of them we know where they are. Some of them are in hotels and that. So how do you bring the package together?
Bring them home.
Yeah. So I think it'd be good. And regional council's not taking a lead, but hey, someone's and I know Hastings District Council now there, but it'd be good to see if regional council can play a part in that, and we would support. We would support it from our marae. I'm sure all our marae, we just want to see our whānau and whares. Yep.
Good point. Is it?
Yeah, just and my last point is that our river levels are very low, and water restrictions have just come in. And I know Paul has got something about directly about the Kotahi River, but generally across the whole Rohe, we're in water restriction. Paul, you got that?
Thank you, Matua.
Paul name keeps coming up.
Over with you, Paula.
I just wanted to say something about the longest place name in the world. Taumata whakatangianga ko tamatea turipu kaka piki maunga orono kupoko ai whenua ki tana tau. At Porangahau there's a big board that's got that name on it, and the picture there that tells a little story. We're about to add to that on the 5th of March. Teko Teko has been carved, and he'll come to Porangahau Marae and start his journey, and he's going to be placed up on highest point, the taumata, on that day. The whānau in charge, our Scott whānau, having a big day supported by the hapu o Ngāti Kere, Pihere and Manuhiri. And so just to let the world know, te mata o Māori, that we, I think it's a wonderful thing that's just happening out there for us as we're starting to expand. Look out for us, we're coming.
And that was on the 5th of March.
On the 5th of March is all that will happen. And the Scott whānau are going to do 5th and 6th to do a bit of filming for the greater need, and then what will happen after that. So just to say that we have a huge amount of people come to the sign board. I'm not sure what our whānau want to do with that, or whether they want to, or how they might take the excitement to the hilltop, but that'll all be talked about on the 5th and the 6th. Just to let us all know. And you're right, I will talk about a proud river called the Porangahau Tauri Kotahi, and I just went and took some pictures this morning, so we can just have a look at how it's turned itself into a trickle.
Just asking Anna Leader, I was putting up a photo of Matua talk. When did you take the photo, Paula?
I took the photo at Bush Road, and the one photo is the Porangahau River, or Tauri Kotahi, and another one is a tributary. And the Porangahau or Tauri Kotahi itself has been reduced to quite just a trickle, really, for a big river.
Do they do any, the regional council do any, you do hill surveys and all that, and because you would think it's going to trickle what's happened to all the wildlife and biodiversity in the stream, eh?
Why I bring it here to regional council is I pay $180 a year to the council, regional council for, and I'm just one. So, and I'm not rubbing that in, I'm just saying that it's time to
But at least one.
to see some things different. Yeah. There's the junction on the left-hand side. That's the Porangahau River, and that's a tributary coming down from the Bush Road to behind you up here.
Yeah,
you're looking at it there. There's the
that one there.
there's the river flow in Tauri Kaitai at the minute. It's a proud river. Through the years of our life, it's fed many, many people down in Porangahau. And there's one more I took from the bridge looking the other way. There it is. Yeah.
The one there?
There, that one.
Yeah.
The one there. So that's carrying on. Now that's up Bush Road. That's about 18 k's up the road from Porangahau. And we're in a time where we're talking about a tank, we're talking about three waters, we're talking about all sorts of things to do with our wai. And for me, we got to work out how we start cutting back on taking the water from inland. And the amount of resource consents that I've seen coming through in Central Hawke's Bay is ridiculous. I don't know how you stop them, or how do you, it's like now that we're dealing with water, everyone speed up on taking it. It's disheartening, I tell you. And I'm late on the block. And are we too late? When, when do we get serious about this? When it's all gone. So for me, something's got to be done. Something has to be done. And soon. We've been talking about this water ever since I've been on this regional council. And that's all we've been doing for me, talking about it. So I'm hopeful. We just keep talking about, keep showing us pictures, and hopefully something will.
Keep showing the evidence, Matua, because we're all concerned and we feel your mamai.
Absolutely.
And I'll let James respond.
Kia ora, Paora. The Kotahi plan change is the answer to your question. So we have until the end of 2024 to put in place quality and quantity limits on the Porangahau awa that achieve te mana o te wai. And that obviously is the restoration of the Māori, of the ecology of that river first and foremost, and then providing for human consumptive needs after that, and then providing for irrigation and industry after that. So that's the hierarchy set up in law. That's the timetable that we have to work to by law, and Kotahi is our process to engage the Porangahau community in that catchment on how we're going to do that. We've got broad powers to curb all the existing takes, so review of the resource consents and to impose stricter limits. We've also got powers around land use, so to control land use for its impacts on that. So we have all the tools available to us, and the partnership that we've been discussing in recent months between this committee, the Regional Planning Committee, over the the next 2 years in particular, which is when the heavy lifting on the writing of this plan will happen, is the vehicle to address these very issues. So it has been a long time coming, I'd acknowledge that. We've actually had the power to impose water quality and quantity limits on this since 1991, and like many regional councils, there hasn't been a high level of control, and we certainly haven't had focus on Te Mana o Te Wai. So that's all about to change, and I think it's great that you're providing inspiration for this committee for that mahi that lies ahead. And now we've got to go and do the hard yards of the mātauranga, as well as the science that our science team brings to the table, and look at what needs to change to get much better outcomes, and then take that to the community, because there'll be some choices and all of that. The one thing that I would say, though, that sits over the top that we've got some very limited control over, because we've got a lot of levers, but climate change is one, being a global issue, and the effects we're already seeing in terms of a drying trend for the region, and what's been predicted with the science we've had so far about further drying of the East Coast, is something that's going to be a headwind that's going to challenge all of us. So while we'll change everything we possibly can within the region, there are things happening at the global scale that are going to continue to make this job even harder. But I think that just reinforces the urgency with which we've got to do this, mate.
Absolutely.
James. And is that the Tamatea report? Thank you, Matua.
I just asked, what's the percentage reduction in the water flow? Is that about 10% now, or a bit less or a bit more? You know, what is it usual? What was it before, you know?
I've only been home 8 years.
So is that about...
And
25% maybe? Or?
The notable drop since you've been
it's
home?
a notable drop. And for me, it's not all about climate. I think there's
extraction.
The extraction is a big part of it, and not necessarily just from the Porangahau River. I totally believe that the aquifer contributes to the Porangahau River, and the aquifer's been plundered. And what Te Mana o Te Wai has brought to us is that the filling of the aquifer is something we should have been doing a long time ago. I didn't know that there was a method you could fill the aquifer, but taking those waters off the high waters and putting them in areas there with that refill. Great concepts. Long overdue.
Kia
Where our scientists been?
So, thank you, Matua.
Kind of, Madam Chair, just before you move, James, I think that last description you gave in regards to what the Kotahi plan can and should be doing is the clearest. It is the clearest statement that I've actually heard come out of Hawke's Bay Regional Council in regards to what it is. And I think that's the message you need to start sending back out to us. It's not actually the plan itself, it's actually what it's going to achieve. That's what we actually need to hear. Otherwise, the plan is just another plan, or many plans that Hawke's Bay Regional Council has had over the years. It's actually what is it going to achieve? What's going to change? I think that's the message you need to deliver back to us, not only to us at this table, but also out to our hapu and marae and whānau. Because otherwise it's just blah, blah, blah again. So kia ora for that. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Give us something to drive, James.
Yeah, the mana o te wai. Yeah, I think that's the hierarchy is the protection, and it's about the protection of the Māori first and foremost, and that obligation one is to the Māori, to the wai, and I'm hoping that's the thing that's going to make the difference, Matua, because we're all concerned, and we've got climate change on top of it, so it's impacting us everywhere. So kia ora, that's all our reports. It was a little bit of an extra long 20 minutes. Slap again. But I think the most important, sorry, Matua, the most important kōrero comes from the Takiwā reports.
My report is on what's happening in Māori, and it may help the discussion that's just gone past. At the moment, the Māori Peninsula itself has been roped off, and it will have its own Cray 3 area for commercial fishermen, and it will only be for Māori fishermen from there. East Coast, go back to East Coast, and all the rest of it. And the crayfish is good. We're thinking of ourselves and also those that come there for a holiday and want to catch a crayfish. And at the moment, of course, it's a good fishing so far. They've been throwing their crayfish back, the campers, catching too many in the pots. And that's one way. But that was to break it away from the East Coast where the Cray 3 was way up, right through, and then right back this way. But that's not. But the other one is the take. What we had to do with the Opotama is that we had to put a no-take area. Now that comes under the law of the land. Not even I can go in there and help myself when we reseed. Otherwise I'll be in court. Anybody. Now we created kaitiaki to look after that, and the kaitiaki does not write out permits. They look after that area, go for a walk, and they live in that area. So they know the area. That's just gone through court now that the Opotama, Waikokopu to Opotama is going to be reseeded in paua and mussels. So that's it. It did.
We're getting there.
Like yours, it disappeared. You know, my boys are kaitiaki, and so I said, go and check it out, see if they're coming back. He goes back then, he says, yeah, but slow, there's only a few. So the reseeding is still to come at a certain time. So that's what we've done at Māori, and I think it's worthwhile looking at that. I don't know how you're going to break yours up. Commercial will certainly take it if they come in. You know,
it's been taken from the shore.
Yeah. At one meeting, I can give this because it happened a few years ago, about 10 years ago. They come through, and the joker come through, had a wire rope right through his pots, and he laid 100 pots. And then he pulled them up with the wire rope. It was brought up at the fishing meeting, so I said to them at that time, you know, you can't go along and help yourself to a wire rope, but a hacksaw can do it.
And with that point, I'll ask for someone to
it certainly worked, but they didn't pick up their pots either.
Okay, we'll be moved by Paul. I can have a seconder to
Thank you.
our reports. Seconded by Peter. And all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And now on to James, the CEO and the Chair's verbal reports.
Chair, have we got the Chairman of the Council online?
Rick first?
Yeah, I'll defer to Rick in the first instance.
No, you go first, James. I'm happy for you to start.
Kia ora, Rick. Committee members, perhaps with at the risk of stating the obvious, the sort of the single biggest thing hanging over the organisation right now is the COVID-19 situation and the likely surge in Omicron cases that we'll see in our community over the coming months. So like all public organisations at the moment, we're working with our regional partners around managing the continuity of public services through the coming months and also supporting our communities. And just want to acknowledge the ongoing collaboration that we're having through the Regional Leadership Forum with Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated and the Tai Whenua network under there, and some of our post-settlement governance entities who are also collaborating around supporting whānau through the coming period. There's a high degree of uncertainty for all of us about when and how much and how it's all going to unfold, but we are all anticipating interruption to our ability to perform the usual functions that we need to as a council. So we've got our critical services, those that we rely on for things like flood protection in a flood event, our civil defence, emergency management, our compliance and pollution response team in particular. At the moment, working on a rotational basis of work from home and work in the office to keep those teams separated and ensure that we protect those workers from the ability to, or from infection, so that we can ensure that we keep those services running in the meantime. The rest of the organisation, we're trying to maintain as much business as usual activity with people still coming to work, but obviously as infection numbers grow, there'll be an increasing desire to work from home. But we're trying to respond to the government's traffic light framework by not going to a lockdown situation and continuing to live with COVID, if you like. So that uncertainty we expect will have the biggest impact this year, or the impact of COVID on our community engagement, particularly that we envisaged having around Kotahi. So the plan was to have extensive number of hui this year on a takiwā basis, as I think you've previously been briefed, right across the rohi. So we don't know what sort of impact that's going to have specifically, but we expect it'll be disruptive, and therefore there'll be delays in the number of hui that we'll be able to have. And we'd appreciate guidance from this committee about how we navigate those challenges over the coming months to ensure that we can make what progress we can around the very important issues that Paula was raising before. So while the virus continues, the environmental issues aren't getting any better, and that's true of climate change, as it's true of biodiversity, as it's true of our freshwater challenges, which we discussed last year, are all interlinked and are big challenges for the region. So that hangs over us, and also interruption to our ability to work with individual landowners. The committee will be aware that we've really ramped up our activity, some of which has been reported in the reports from the Tai Whenuas about the projects we have on the ground. The good news is that we've got more happening on the ground than we've ever had before in terms of fencing and planting, cleaning up our waterways, getting new wetlands created, all those sorts of things, and fencing off our Indigenous, high priority Indigenous sites around the region. So that's great, and we've had significant funding, as we've reported previously to this committee, which has come from government to expand that work. But what will be the impact of sort of extended periods of illness beyond that? And like most organisations, we're facing the challenges of supply constraints around things like fencing materials and people to do the mahi. And we've got a high inflation environment too, where costs are increasing across many parts of our business as well. So, look, I won't labour the point, because I think most of the issues we're facing as a region, everybody else is facing as well. And I just think we have to be realistic about how much we can achieve over particularly the next 6 months, as we just go through what will probably be a pretty difficult autumn and winter for our community. And so, look, our number one focus for us as an organisation and for the community is going to be our people. So recognising that the health and well-being of our people comes first. We'll achieve as much of our work as we possibly can, but not at the cost of our people or our ability to support the community. So that will remain the focus for the year. So that's probably all, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions about that or anything. Obviously, later on the agenda, there's the significant activity report, which I think shows there's lots of activity happening across council on important work. Happy to answer any questions on that as well. So, kia ora, Chair.
Questions, Arno, before we go to Rick? Kia ora. Our people first, That's an important message. And Now on to you, Rick. Now, Chair, sorry, I was looking at the wrong agenda and I put the CEO first because he was next door to me.
Well, that's all right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think you.
Oh, thank you. Could I just firstly come back and re-emphasise what James has said? This is going to the same thing, but slightly different words. Now, this is going to be a challenging year because we've got the virus raging around the place, and there's little doubt it's going to make people nervous. There's little doubt it's going to make people change their behaviour. There's little doubt it's going to make people cautious about going to meetings and doing other things. So people are likely to retreat. But having said that, on the other hand, the issues for our environment are not going to stop. They're going to continue to grow and get more intense, and we should be doubling and redoubling our efforts to make improvements. And that's what brings me back to the Kotahi plan. For me personally, I've been really pleased with the progress in building the relationships between the councillors, the RPC and the Māori committee and staff. And I see that this is the key pathway, or the best pathway for us to get to a plan in the shortest possible time. I look, just to repeat what I've said on previous occasions, I think we need to keep saying it. I look with some concern that we've spent years on tank, which has the ability to bring about improvements and changes to the way in which we manage the environment, but still, years on, we have no plan. And we're stuck. We cannot afford to do this again. The issues are too important. The consequences are substantial, and we just have to find the best way of doing it. So the issues that people have raised today about water, about the quality of the water, about the amount of the water, about how we have water for people coming home, for our councils and so on, are all involved, all wrapped up in Kotahi. That's the means by which we bring about change. So I'm really keen to see and work with the Māori committee and everybody on the team as to how we can continue to make progress on Kotahi, because we have 2 years was the timeline for us, and we can't afford to lose 6 months or a year because of the virus. So we need to figure out how we can work around these issues and still make progress, because progress is really important. Otherwise, the issues continue to grow and get worse. So that's my big thing, is trying to make the place go faster, even though we've got a much more challenging environment in which we work. Yes, James is right. We have to look after the people. We have to look after the people, the staff. We have to look after others as well. So we can't put people in unnecessary risk, but we do need to still make progress. In my view, we cannot afford to stop, because the consequences for future generations are too important.
Rick, any questions or comments for Rick? Carl? So if I could just get someone to move that we receive the CEO and Chair's verbal reports. Have a mover. Moved by Mike, seconded by Api. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We're going to follow-ups from previous Māori committee meetings, from the first one, LIDAR Partnership Program. Refer to reference, we got the information attached to that around the LIDAR. Were there any other questions?
We have Ian online.
Ian's online. So
sorry, Ian.
If there's any questions.
If there's any questions?
Oh, sorry, what page is that on the document?
Page 15.
Okay,
So follow up in previous Māori committee meetings. No questions for Ian? Number 2, reports of regional council and committee meetings. Mare and Katrina. Is there anything? Follow up on there, self-explanatory. Number 3 is discussions of items not on the agenda. Is that one about James?
Sorry. So this, this is the one in relation to procurement. So, Chair, the committee will recall that over the last 2 years, particularly in response to the situation with COVID and government economic recovery, we've been looking at social procurement outcomes as part of the surge in funding for things like fencing and planting and the upgrade of our flood schemes. But prior to that, there was already work commencing around moving our procurement to a more progressive space that achieves not just financial outcomes for council, but also achieves social, environmental and cultural outcomes for the wider community. So included in the agenda pack is a range of tools which have been adopted by council. We've developed them in partnership with the other councils in the region, which guides the new approach to procurement, and particularly draw this committee's attention to the cultural elements within there and the cultural outcomes sought, and those that speak to the Māori economy and Māori economic development. So that's a deliberate part of that that policy. In addition to that, and going back to the questions raised earlier by Councillor Ormsby, we have specific projects underway at the moment, the upgrade of the flood schemes and the work that we're doing under the Jobs for Nature funding, where we are currently partnering and looking to partner more with Māori entities. And look, an obvious case in point is the Tiwai Māori Trust and the Kaitiaki Rangers, and the work that we've done with them around the upgrade of some of the flood schemes. And there's also work in the Jobs for Nature space where we're partnering there too. What we'd like to do, and we've suggested here, is that when we have made some more progress with those pieces of work, and we've got some good numbers to report in terms of participation and outcomes, that we bring them back to this committee. So that's the plan. As I said earlier, we do have our procurement lead, Mark Heaney, available in the room, and he can answer any questions about the policies itself in particular, or any of the work going on in this area.
I've got a few questions, and I suppose it's just in the discussion we had earlier and around those planning. So you know, that collective approach, because how do we develop the capacity with Māori and working in that space? You know, with our project or the other projects, are obviously Ruahine, with Māori, with our South, Te Whanganui Arotu, we've got potentially some other projects that may be coming on board in the Jobs for Nature space, because we're working in the environment. So in the project brief, when you look at Jobs for Nature, it's working within the environment, and you're working with whānau that are connected to those projects. So how I know you've got a model already there now. How do we tease that model out and then engage for those other sectors in our community, those Māori groups that are going to be doing those projects to enhance the environment? With the Ministry for Environment, they're about improving the waterway and some of their key statements that they're making. So with the regional council being a monitor and working in that space, how do we move forward with those projects? And like I said, everyone's writing up work plans or work schedules for those individual teams to initiate over a 2-3 year period. It just makes sense there should be more of a connect with those projects that we're implementing, especially on the waterways, that we're doing work in those water catchments. I just want to look at how do we get more value for those projects with the regional council in that partnership space.
Chair, if Ian Maxwell's still on the line, I know that he has been working with the Department of Conservation. Is he there? Ian might have had to duck off. So Ian has been working since the inception of Jobs for Nature with Department of Conservation around how do we support capability building and coordination across all of the Jobs for Nature contracts in a way that ensures that we're not making the same mistakes over and over again or duplicating effort, and that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. So I can't speak with any on any depth to how that's going, but I'm aware that effort is being undertaken, particularly I think being coordinated by, as I say, by DOC. Just the other thing I'd note is that as part of the refresh of our regional economic development delivery model as a region. We've committed to a new economic development entity to be co-governed and co-led with Te Kahui Ohanga, representatives from Te Kahui Ohanga. And so the work that is now underway and will occur over the next 4 or 5 months will be to establish this new entity, the governance around that, and the expectation of local government as a funder is there will be a dedicated focus on Māori economy. And so I think there's a nice synergy here of looking at how do we build Māori businesses, how do we then take the public spend out of central government and local government and through more progressive procurement models, then continue to build that capability and capacity in the Māori economy. So I think there's some exciting things that lie ahead there.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've said, James, in terms of the economic development. But if we take a step back to sort of the original question around our tendering process and those hunting for contracts to do this mahi, is it worth something like, or have value to have some sort of workshop that's offered to educate around our tendering process and how they may bid for that, what's included, what's excluded? That way you can get them all in the same place at the same time, explaining our policy and what the process looks like. I think that might be of value.
It's an excellent suggestion. So,
Workshops already, do you want to come?
do you want to speak to that, Mark, or?
Morning, Madam Chairman. Morning, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Councillors. Those that can't hear me, I've now got a microphone. My name is Mark Heaney. As James introduced me, I lead the procurement function for the council, and I also run the Sustainable Homes programme. So, lovely to be here. It's nice to see you. There's some familiar faces. I was going to say familiar old faces, but they're familiar faces. Some of you I don't know. So if anybody's shy and they have questions they'd like to ask, please feel free to contact me afterwards. But in answer to the question that Councillor Ormsby's raised, we have started training on the policy or operational manual. So we're training externally and internally to make sure that we're getting the best outcomes in line with progressive procurement. An example recently was that we held a workshop for engineers, and this was a national rivers group of engineers, and I was invited to go along and talk to them about what we have done in Hawke's Bay in terms of progressive procurement. Much to my surprise and some pride, I found that we are actually leading in terms of the implementation of the government-led initiative. So I was really quite pleased with that, and there is a consistency across the 5 councils in Hawke's Bay that other regional councils are quite envious of and are looking to our model to adopt in their areas. So it is going well. I will be more than happy to arrange workshops for those that are interested in building their capability and capacity to do these areas of work, this mahi. And we have a process that can be explained very simply in terms of open tender processes for those that are capable of doing the work. And that is done through what's called the Government Gets website. We notify anybody who has the ability to do the job that they're invited to bid on it. So we tend to do that on projects that are over $20,000 in value. So we advise people to keep up to date with the gets, but it would be so useful to have a directory of Māori suppliers and providers for Hawke's Bay. Now I'm working with Amatai at the moment, with Tairāwhiti and Heritonga, to actually put that directory together so we know who's out there that could potentially do this work. That is the list of people that I would love to invite to do a workshop with. Sorry, that's a very long answer to a very short question.
But the tautoko and the follow-up to the follow-up will be wānanga workshops in Eastern Idea anyway.
Yeah, and
So
to
thank you,
give you a snapshot, I suppose, because we're trying to develop capacity within our Māori networks. Obviously, we've got PFG, PGFs, we've got Tai Whenuas involved, and we're developing our whānau into that space. We've got contractors that work in that space. Obviously, we with government as well. Government wants to develop the Māori economy, and James mentioned to that. So I suppose when you're looking at your tendering process, we're looking at how do we get more Māori businesses, exactly what you said, involved in the process, but then how do we also get them through the tender process, and I'll give the Hastings District Council as an example. Years ago they tendered out footpaths, but then in the tender process they said, right, how are you going to give the community and those disadvantaged people opportunity to work within your business? So they added a tier to the contract process that allowed less fortunate people or people that were challenged to be a part of the process, because then the contract had to demonstrate how they were engaging with people that in society that were challenged, and that was part. So I suppose, when you look at a straightforward tender process and you go through a tick box process, you may not achieve the outcome that we're all trying to achieve within the community. That's what I'm saying. So it's about helping people up to be able to meet regional
I think the
council.
workshop is the best way forward, because when you have the sustainable home workshops, I think when you came down to Wairoa, it was packed out. Back in the days where we could all sit together in a room closely. But I love the idea, and that's where you can stop that. Where those ones are disadvantaged, because it's you just think, oh, procurement process, or what's that going to involve, and it probably puts off a lot of people.
And I think the example was vital when there was roadworks about 5 years up there, and an outside contractor came over from Taranaki, and then they were staying at the hotels of that, and then the local whānau was saying, hey, what about an opportunity for a local provider within the region to provide for that, to do that, undertake that work? And I suppose the Hawke's Bay stands for Hawke's Bay Regional Council, so look for providers in the local area to try and do that mahi, plus support people going into a new workspace. You know what I mean? So in a standard, all I'm saying, in a standard contract process, it doesn't differentiate between that social work, but you can include the two if we can. And I think that's a better, like Rick was saying, it's a better environment for us to also, it's a better vision for the future that, hey, we're building capacity within the organisation, but we're noting that in the contract space. So I don't think your current procurement process doesn't go that far, does it?
Yes, it does.
Does it?
Yeah, thankfully.
Oh, awesome. Oh, great.
Something to follow off.
In the actual evaluation process of tenders, we have weighted criteria, which can be price, it can be quality, it can be whether they're local, it's whether they're paying a living wage. And within that, we 3 years ago introduced 15% of our weighted criteria was around supporting the 4 pillars of the economic, the social, the cultural and the environmental. So we've been doing that for 3 years now, and it really gives everybody the opportunity to think about how they're contributing to those 4 areas of work when they're bidding for something that may not directly favour one of those 4 pillars. So just think, what are they doing as an organisation about waste minimisation? What are they doing about reducing their carbon footprint? And if we ask the questions, they start to think in a different way. And that's the sort of thing we can bring out in a workshop.
Yes.
Oh, I've been put my name down on the workshop.
And I just might forward Matua. Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have just one comment, and then, well, I have 2 comments actually that I want to make in regards to this. So, first of all, I think this is a very progressive thing, and I support all that's been spoken about. It really is. It's impressive. So my comment is quite nuanced now, that as of the last meeting we had as a collective governance group, and we split off to talk about how we would approach Kotahi. That was a first step in a process of moving to a fairly sophisticated treaty partner relationship, as opposed to a consultative relationship, which is what our history is. And so I'm just saying that as background to what I'm saying. So I like this program. When I look at the flow diagram and it just been mentioned the 4 pillars, then that raises a question as to the Māori mention is under social. When we're across, under cultural, when we're across the social, economic and environmental. And a more progressive one will actually move us out of there, because if we're just cultural, then that kind of just throwback to the old days when we did the pōhiri and then the real business started. And we need to move on from that. And the Regional Council has got a chance to start leading in this, because it's across the board as we as hapu engage with local governments and central government and trying to move out of this role of just being some kind of advisor and some kind of cultural expert. So I'm putting that out there, why I support this document and what it stands for, and I like some of the detail of it. And I also commend the fact that the encouragement for Māori businesses, which Peter's just mentioned. I'm totally supportive of that. However, I've got one comment to make here. Māori business is a Māori business. It is not mana whenua. So what I'm saying to the council, through your procurement process, you may offer a contract to a Māori business. You still have to then go to mana whenua to get them to operate. Because just because our Māori business doesn't give them the key to our hapu lands and our marae land. And I'm saying that because I've already experienced it.
Good point.
We're a local government, hired a Māori organisation. Kia ora, we've ticked the cultural box. You guys go and do the contract and never talk to the local marae. So, you know, we're starting to get more sophisticated in this relationship, and I'm flagging it here against a very positive background. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. That's it. So if I could just get someone to receive the follow-up items for our previous meeting. Mover, Haora, seconder, Hiniwai, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much, Mark. And we're going to call for minor items. Were there any minor items? We didn't have anything in there. Oh, don't have to move back because we didn't have any items. Okay, moving along. Decision items now. We're going to item number 9, Tangata Whenua Hearing Panel. Commissioners, Conflicts of Interest Management. And that's Malcolm, I suppose, Malcolm and Katrina.
Kia ora. Oh, Malcolm Miller, aho.
Kia ora, Malcolm.
This is a brief paper, I hope, and I hope it's reasonably self-explanatory. It originates from the Hearings Committee, who, in conversation when we were looking at appointing commissioners last year, got into discussion around appointing Māori commissioners, people with Māori expertise, and basically saying they want to see more local people appointed onto the hearing panels. The question that arose was conflict of interest. When does that sort of pop up, and who can sit on a panel without being conflicted in different situations? So that's what this paper is about, just sort of a bit of a discussion around how do we manage that, recognise when there's conflict of interest, and see that we're getting people on the committee, local people where we can with Māori expertise, but not going on there having perhaps participated in a submission or something like that prior to being selected as a commissioner. So we did go and got some legal advice on this, so that was attached to the report and incorporated some of those comments in the report. And I've added a list of the those who are qualified with the Making Good Decisions qualification, who are local tangata whenua, and I've included a couple on there from Beyond Row, Kiri, and Regional Profit, who we've sort of used or looked to use in the past. So having written this, it was really to sort of give the opportunity for some discussion through to the Māori committee to see what the thoughts were. Are we in the right, doing the right thing in terms of what we're recommending? Can we do things a bit differently? What are we missing? So it's really, I'm keen to see hear any feedback to this to take back to the hearings committee.
Kia ora. Thank you. Welcome. Mike.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. I suppose our real concern is here actually seeing at the hearings panels is actually seeing our face reflected back at us. So yeah, we understand the part around conflicts, and it is hard for us at sometimes because of our whakapapa. But like all things around conflicts, it's actually what is that direct conflict versus what is the wider conflict. I appreciate the paper, and it depends how one views and reads the paper as to their understanding around what a conflict is. So if you don't have good understanding of what the term conflict means, you could read that and feel that you'll always be conflicted. Hence my comment this morning that I had a conflict around the conflict, given the paper. So I suppose that was the part that was missing. And it's also, I suppose, there are those that will say, given our responsibility to advocate for our people, and that's our role, we will always have that conflict because that's the nature of our roles. So being able to understand that personally and actually put your hand up and say, I will never be able to serve on a hearings panel in regards to anything within Māori because I will always have that conflict versus those that actually don't have those roles, but do have that whakapapa to the region, who actually do not have a direct personal conflict. Have I helped you understand those issues for us? Yeah, and I think that's the real issue here for us. We're wanting to see ourselves reflected back when we come to sit in those hearings, but more importantly is our own understanding. If we're going to advocate for our people and take the advocating role, then of course we're naturally going to be conflicted. It's just the nature of the beast. Kia ora tātou.
We're conflicted by our whakapapa. And you can't get rid of that. So yeah. Any other questions or comments?
I think there was just a national review done on the commissions. I know I participated in that in regards, and we just highlighted about Māori engagement, and I think some recommendations have come out nationally in regards to changes in the process and how Māori are more engaged, similar to what Mike was saying. So I read part of the report, but there's a lot of recommendations, and they were looking at how they can address some of those concerns nationally when they're doing these training programs and that to get more Māori engaged in the process, because there's some Māori doing it, but then they lose sight of, once they've done the training, then they don't carry on to the next stage and they don't sit on the panel. So how do you encourage more Māori to be a participant? And I've done training in that, but I've never sat on a panel. It's just for my own personal knowledge when I'm involved with meetings like this, that I have an understanding of the process. And then I suppose for all our members that may want to participate, we should encourage our members on our boards that work in these forums to participate in that process, because then you're educated and given oversight in how policy and process and that are done. So that for me, I didn't want to be a commissioner per se, but I wanted to acknowledge that when I'm going to a submission and submitting, what the background thinking is around that. So yeah, it's just around
he would have a conflict because you put in a submission and you couldn't sit on there anyway else. I suppose there's that direct conflict, but it's about, I think, I don't know how you'd go about it, but you need to refer to maybe our committee, you know, if you need to ask us, because you wouldn't know if they have a conflict as tangata whenua, maybe whakapapa wise. You know, I might come from Wairoa, but I might have a connection in another part of the iwi, and a personal connection through perhaps like Paura. You wouldn't think I'm related to Paura, but I'm related through my mother who comes from the South Island. So, you know, there's all those sort of things, but that stays with us, I believe, and you need to come to us to ask those sort of questions.
Through you, Chair.
Tangata whenua can answer it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Through you, Chair, just the references that are in the paper, both to the Auditor General's, there's a piece in there at paragraph 11 that says that where the person is a member of an iwi hapu or can whakapapa to parties involved in the hearing process, this alone will not necessarily raise a conflict of interest. So there's some useful information here, and also the Simpson-Grierson report, which is also attached, that helps us to work through that conflict of interest situation.
And the best way to deal with that too is declare, you know,
Absolutely.
ask.
Madam Chair, you know, we sit in here with the goodness of our heart, and we've come from a long way to be a part to constructively move things forward. All these papers, for me, don't apply until you've got conflict. And then they all come to force. And then you've got a board that can deal with that sort of thing.
Just about
Seem to spend hours and hours talking about how we can't do something. To me, it's that simple. I haven't come here to mate up with every Tom, Dick and Harry. I've come here with an open heart to talk about all of Māoridom and it going forward. When I read these papers, it takes me hours to read some of these papers. And all they talk about is how you can't do something.
Well, it's about just protecting yourself, I think, and making sure you...
I mean, I didn't come here for that purpose. Why are we so hell-bent on the courts and the laws and the rules and the regulations when we're here for a whole different concept?
Yeah, I think that's why they wanted to hear our feedback as tangata whenua. So from our perspective, so you've got a perspective.
Adam Chair, we've been talking about a partnership. I let Mark go without actually saying something to him. And what I say to Mark is that what he talked about is fantastic.
Yeah.
But I can't take that in 5 minutes. But if I was a partner to him, or if I had someone that would partner and was part of drawing up the plan and how it all works, which is what I thought we were hoping to try and achieve.
It was on the other item, Matawa. Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, well, good point. Thank you.
It just, yeah, I like the paper too about the conflicts is good. But one of the things I've noticed over the last couple of years is that we asked all these people to hop on these commissioning boards and we don't give them a job. We have put on a lot of people from other rohe at the expense of our own people who we put on the training, sacrifice their time and stuff, and we don't give them a job because they haven't had the experience. It's like when they come off their course, they should be written up as fit to sit on the commissioning table, and that should be the only criteria. Whereas they've just done all this training for nothing. I noticed in here it's got a little statement from previous councils with the iwi about how they would look after these people or treat conflicts and things. Well, maybe you could do the same thing here, and we have an agreement that we'll try and get you on within 2 years if you're doing a course or something.
That's the making good decisions course though, but you know, when you're sitting there...
I know, but this should also mean the commissioning.
Māori, that's not in that course, that's something you already have.
I know, but it should also be the commissioning course. To be a commissioner, it should be a little deal that if you've done that course, we'll try and get you on the commissioning table within 2 years. Otherwise, you're not ever going to get experience. And you just wasted your time.
Chair, I'm mindful in our midst that we have an experienced hearings commissioner who may have something to add to this.
Yeah, keep.
Roger?
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, there's a couple of points. One is clearly there's a need for local knowledge. So many of the issues that come before when you boil down to the submissions and that is local knowledge. And that gives you some context, or gives the other panel members some context to this particular group or this particular individual in their submissions. The other thing is that there has to be quite a bit of balance put into this. It's a common sense thing in some ways. To me, there's far too much emphasis on who's related to who and considering that conflict. What about occupational? So if I'm a farmer and I'm sitting on a hearing that's going to affect farming, am I conflicted? I don't think they put the farmers through that scrutiny as they would put us through that scrutiny. So I think there has to be some balance in this. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this document, it's fine. But all I'm saying is there should be some balance in it, and there is certainly a case for local knowledge, because just other Māori from other districts may not know, or probably don't know, a whole lot of things that are part and parcel of that particular consent or plan change or whatever.
Thank you. Good point. Taking on. That's it. Okay, thank you. Katrina Malcolm's of someone to receive
some recommendations.
Sorry, recommendations. So we're just going to move to 1, 2, 3 and 4 of recommendations.
Just a quick question. Do the regional council pay for Māori standing RPC members to undertake their training? I just want to ask the question. Is that funded? Okay. Thank you.
So that's the other barrier, the costing. So you're right to move 1, 2, 3 and 4. Anyone move by anyone? Can have a seconder, please? Papa Bill, all in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried.
Aye.
That's it. Okay, next one is the item 10, Primary Industry Pan Sector Group representation. Now, I hope I've got the name right. Zan Harding and Brendan Powell.
Just got Brendan here today.
Brendan? Kia ora, Brendan. Take it away.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Taranaki te maunga, ko waihi te awa, I whānau mai au ki Hawara, ko Brendan Powell tōku ingoa. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Brendan.
So the paper that we have brought you today is about the primary sector pan sector group. Several years ago, when the Tuki Tuki plan was in progress, we had a pan sector group to draw primary industry people together to build agreement on the content of that plan. Since then, that group hasn't been active, but we've continued with a Hawke sector group. And then in recent times, there's been a desire expressed by those people to broaden it again to a wider pan sector group. So in October last year, we had an initial meeting to bring the wider group together. And we were really looking at, we're all working with landowners. We have in common the people that we are working for. And so what are our common interests and challenges that we could work together on that would allow us to achieve more than we could achieve as separate organisations? And one of the things from that initial meeting is that there was a desire to have Māori representation on the group, but how to have that and who is the appropriate representative was something that we couldn't answer, and so we wanted to get advice and recommendations on that, and that's why we bring this to you today. And I did listen in to, online to some of the previous conversation that you had, and I noticed that Roger mentioned moving beyond the role of cultural advisors into the social and economic area. And also, is it Maori business or is it mana whenua? And those are the sort of questions that have come up for us, and so we're seeking a recommendation from this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Any questions or comments?
I suppose when you're looking at a forum like this and we're going into three waters and that we don't want to dilute our strategic position, and it'll be just how that works in the framework? Because obviously we've got Three Waters, you've got the agriculture business, they've got a lot of challenges coming up for them. So how does that place us as governors in regards to the role that, I'm just asking, because then you're putting one potentially Māori person into the group, and I know people commented on Three Waters, not Three Waters, sorry, in regards to other committees. We need to make sure whatever we're deciding on the individuals or how it's structured, you know what I mean? Because we don't want to lessen our fit in the process, especially with Three Waters and that coming on, and agriculture, horticulture, obviously huge water takes and all that, so it's a lot of challenging questions coming up, and then how that engagement process works. I was just putting it out, someone whatever answer, I'm just saying, because there's in a governance, right, how are we going to operate by recommending this, and then how does that report back?
Conflicts with other things that are happening.
Yeah, because we've got so much work on the moment. Hey, I don't know, someone might be able to answer, and that agriculture, horticulture space is a lot of challenges in that area with water and water take. Hey, how do you, as governors, how do we work in that framework with not going against some of the principles that our tai whenua and our whānau are telling us? I don't know the answer, I just want to ask the question and see if there's a solution to that.
You have something to say, Mike, for the one for me?
Yeah, so trying to find that one Māori to have the Māori voice. Good luck. When you find it, can you let us know? So it really just is a real difficult question, given that these are normally, these boards are normally statutory boards, or there's a process around the appointments that take place, and the roles don't always coincide with the whakaara or the thinking of Māori. So the reason why you may want someone sitting there that has a Māori perspective may not be the same reason why we want to have someone there with that Māori perspective. So so that's where that little bit of a tension starts right from the get-go. So I know that there have been recent appointments. New Zealand Beef and Lamb have made an appointment in regards to Baden Barber. We've seen Baden Barber who applied for the role. He went through I think it was a recruitment process through the Institute of Directors because of that nature of the role that was doing. So that's how he got, or they wanted to see diversification, and that's how they actually approached it. To even try and find a mandated person to sit there. Many of us have mandates, but we are mandated to a certain group, to a certain location. So to get someone to represent Māori, good luck. Sorry. It can't be much clearer than that. It is hard. It is hard. So I wish you all of the best on that role. So perhaps it's not trying to find one, but actually stepping outside of the box in regards to your own thinking, and actually constructing a co-governance, just a co-governance model outside of your main board that actually allows a wider range of representation. And helps you to deal with the questions in regards to around Māori, and how to the issues, and how to transfer information between both those parties, and taking someone from out of that pool or out of that groupie onto your main body. That may be your best way around this. Kia ora.
So I suppose that when you go look at the recommendations, number 3, it's just a suggestion. We can't really point out a person to you, or there's a possible option from what Mike just mentioned to you. So you probably...
Madam Chair, I've got an answer.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Kia ora koutou, Ian Maxwell, apologies for lateness. I was listening into your kaupapa on the J4E and stuff earlier, but I was on Facebook, so I couldn't get into the conversation after I dropped off Zoom. But happy to talk about that over the break if you want. Look, in relation to the question, I think really useful feedback. Thanks, Mike. Unfortunately, I thought we had gone through the paper to kind of bring out the view that we're looking for a representative, because I absolutely understand the problem of finding a representative for Māori in a group like this. But we really want to be guided on participation. How do we bring the Te Ao Māori world view, Māori agribusiness into this group? Fair to say there are a number of people in the room who bring that knowledge and that understanding who could participate, and absolutely part of that journey could be at some point in time we need to broaden the conversation out more widely to Māori rather than through this one individual. So really open to your views on how you think we best to get that Te Ao Māori worldview, Māori agribusiness in particular, participating in the kaupapa of this group.
So with that, I think going back to what I suggested is perhaps thinking outside of the box of what you're currently trying to do, and actually putting a secondary group together that actually is purely around the Māori view. And if you're seeking a representation to go the other way, then do it that way. The danger is, so I saw there that you were got, in regards to Pahawera, you had a representation, you thought you were there in regards to that, but it didn't eventuate. But that person from Pahawera can only actually speak for Pahawera. That's your problem. If you haven't grasped how to engage with us yet in this forum, when will you? Because it doesn't change. The method of engagement is still the same. It's always been the same. It doesn't matter what forum we're in. It's still the same. Especially when you're trying to get a pan-Māori voice. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to Ngāti Kanu Iwi Incorporated, because they're the only ones who have a mandate to speak on behalf of Kahanunu.
Chair, perhaps if I could just respond, I absolutely, completely appreciate and are fully aware of the, if you like, the shift to engagement and how we need to work. Just bear in mind that this is a group that we facilitate, so we don't lead it. So this is the region's primary sector leaders coming together. I'm just wondering whether, in fact, actually what might be helpful is Mike, you or members of committee getting in front of the group and having this conversation directly with them to help shape their thinking and to perhaps give them your worldview.
Happy to support.
The answer for that. So, Charlie?
Yeah, no, I think you might be better off just opening it up to the rest of to the whole district. I noticed you've got 4 dairy farmers on there. You've got 10 from the council. So there's no real limit there. If there's a sector you're talking about, we actually each got our own sectors, I guess. Don't take our one off though.
Okay, cool. So if we, I'm going to move on to one more item before we go for it, because we're going past lunch now. So
I have just one to say at that.
Yeah.
If I was your group and I wanted a Māori input, and you had this forum coming on this day, I would have shot to the chair lady, asked her all the questions you want, send it out to all of us so we can have a look at it, and you would have got an answer big time. We've just done the opposite to that. You've given us a paper with all your stuff on it, and I can't even understand it. It's so complicated. To me, that's how simple it is.
We'll take into account. Okay, so if we can move, someone to move the recommendations, I suppose, list number 3, because we can't give a recommendation.
No, we can't. Mate, I don't know if we can move the recommend because we're not in support of the recommendation. Well, it just doesn't sound like we are, and maybe some more work needs to potentially, that group need to go back and back. I just think I wouldn't be able to, just on the corridor, because it's making a statement, and I don't think we're in a position to.
Yeah, for action to follow up, and follow up with us, and we can't give recommendation of people. Because it's still, you know, in our world, we still have to go through mandates and, you know, well, you're going to go sit on here, so you've got to get the support and then mana whenua, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. We'll just receive the report. Prime Minister, Pen Sector, Group Representation Staff Report. Can I get someone to move that, please? Moved by Papa Bill, seconded by Api. Robin, all in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. James just suggested, because we've got who is it? James?
We've got Kishan from our finance team and Kate from Brand here, who are both involved with the preparation of this paper on the H-brick branding paper.
Yep.
So the suggestion is we just do that now quickly
Move
before lunch.
to item 12 and then we
could.
can have some lunch and we'll come back to the item 11 after when we reconvene. So, sorry,
We'll get a mic if we could over to Kishan. And also we've got Rick obviously on the line, and Rick is a director of H-brick, so Rick might like to perhaps make some opening remarks on it.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, kia ora, everyone.
We'll just see if Rick wants to say any words.
Yeah, no, I've got my mute button off. Thank you for that. Look, the Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company is 100% owned by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and it's to become an arm of economic development. It was originally set up for a couple of main purposes. One was the Ruataniwha Dam, and the second was to manage some tax issues. But we're moving on from there. We have some investments in from the sale of the port, and the purpose it's setting itself to do now is to grow its investments so that it can grow its income stream to help with income, either reduce rates or do more for the environment. So this is to get more bang for our buck. We are resource constrained. We are pushing up rates at a quite a rapid rate, and this can't be continue indefinitely into the future. But there are a lot of environmental issues which need to be attended to, and so we have to find our income. It was felt that by the directors that maybe the old title, Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company, H-brick was out of date, carried a bit of baggage, so we went looking for a new title, a new name, and had some people think about some names, and this is one we've come back with. And at that point, I'll hand over to Kishan to outline to you what it is, and we're here to the Regional Council Investment Company is looking for your feedback on the proposal before it makes a decision.
Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora, everyone. This is Kate from BAN. She's from the marketing agency that was engaged by H-brick to carry out the rebranding. So we do have a presentation that Kate has prepared, and I think it just gives a bit of context as to how we went about the process of coming up with the name. So we'll just get that on right now, and then this paper is seeking endorsement from the committee and any input into the name that was selected.
Are you able to drive it again? If you don't mind. Yep.
This one goes down?
Yes. Wait. Screen.
It's a very brief presentation just to talk you through the process of how we came and what options were presented to the board, and what name was, and the name that was finally selected. So I'll just turn over the time over to Kate.
Kia ora tātou. Ko Kate Kavanagh aho. Lovely to be here at your committee meeting. So I'm from a design studio called Band, and we're in Ahuriri. We had the privilege of working with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council for the past couple of years, basically redesigning the whole look and feel of pretty much every touch point. So kind of felt like we had a good understanding of the regional council. So we were asked to develop a new name for the H-brick, and that's the current brand as it stands. So one might wonder why they need a new one. How do we turn the thing? The page. Cool. Thank you. So I've been asked just to come to kind of talk you through the process that we go through when we're coming up with names. And that kind of was a briefing from Jess and Puri and Kishan and, oops, who's doing that? Is that? Oh yeah, cool. Cool. That's the right page.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's
the right
Got your driver's license?
Right, doing a great
Keep
job.
you on point.
Which one? He's on the transport committee.
Yeah, so we got briefed and then we go away and brainstorm with our team. And then really, sometimes you get a name like that and other times it's obviously a lot slower. This one I pretty much had in my mind straight away, which was awesome. Then you go through a massive process of coming up with other names and checking them, and we have our own internal cultural consultation, just a woman who speaks Te Reo, and we kind of bounce things off her when the name is possibly in Te Reo. And then we presented a short list of names, which was over Zoom, wasn't it, to the HBRIC team. And then that got sort of refined down from that meeting to 3 names, which we'll show you today, and then we obviously have chosen the final name. So if we click through one more, we've kind of seen them all anyway now. So we had Puawai, which is to bloom or come to fruition, which obviously works with the investment company that HBRIC is, and sort of works with Hawke's Bay and the whole natural thing. But that was ruled out. The next one was a bit more. Oh, one more. Yep, that's it. So this was very literal, obviously. Invest, and then Te Matau Māori, obviously bring Hawke's Bay, which we thought was quite nice to bring that in there, but basically it wasn't able to be given IP because it was too broad. And so the name that everyone so far has really loved is Te Matau, which, yeah, we think really works really well. Obviously Hawke's Bay, Te Matau Māori, and then Te Matau, the fish hook. We know the story of the fish hook, creating the bay. And yeah, the fish hook, if you go to the next page, represents prosperity and abundance. And the story, obviously, of Māori. Strength and determination. So we thought that was a really lovely name for HBRIC.
Perhaps through you, Chair, I can sort of step in and add to this. So the Māori Partnerships team was engaged as part of this process with HBRIC. You'll note, and I note that you've mentioned around IP and the genericity of at least 2 of those names. Yep. So Invest just didn't ring any bells, really. Puawai is quite a generic term in terms of blossoming, and the idea was to try and find something that was unique to our place in the world. And Te Matau is something that's quite unique and quite well known. And the idea here was to also blow that up so that Te Matau takes a lead in terms of the font, the size, the boldness.
Yeah, well, there's no brand work done here though, so now we move into the brand component of. So this presentation is just done in a standard plain font. So the next stage, which we will really want to work out a great consultation partnership process, because yeah, it will want to have, obviously, the design wants to reflect the cultural, depth. So it's going to be great to work with you, Puri, and sort of understand how that process can really benefit the design and the outcome.
Any comment? No.
Just some pasa. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thanks,
Yep.
Kate.
No.
And then you, Māori.
There's a few levels of just understanding to feel comfortable, more comfortable about this. So one is that there's another place named Te Matau in the northern South Island. I think the Te Ingoa Park is separation point. Yes. So at one level, questioning whether it's actually appropriate given that there's another place name. So that's one question. The other is the whole rebranding. I understand why you rebrand, but to what outcome is HBRIC seeking? Because they've initiated this project. What outcomes does HBRIC want to seek in terms of rebranding and including a kupu Māori or Māori place name? So yeah, those are my two big questions, so that I feel more comfortable about why we're doing this, where we're going, and is it appropriate?
So the outcomes question is probably one for Kishan in terms of checking as to whether other places have te matau or separation point. That's probably one for Band, who would have done the background work on that.
I'll just get a do an answer, Kishan.
I think I'll probably pass that question on to Rick just to talk about the vision that the directors have for HBRIC. I think this rebrand falls in line with their vision for the next 10 years, which is to grow the asset portfolio of HBRIC, but also to partner with local tangata whenua and local partners. So Rick, I'll pass the time over to you just to answer the question as to why there was a rebranding exercise undertaken, Rick.
Hey, Rick. Oh, you're still muted.
Rick. Still, there we are.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yep.
I understand a search has been done of the company's register and the name is available, so it's not registered by anybody else, so we can register it there. It's not unusual, as I would know it, to see that a name which is also a place name is used in a company name, an entity name. It's not unusual, so I would have thought that was particularly an issue. I know the South Island pretty well, but I haven't heard of Te Matau off the top of my head, so I don't think it's a very well-known name. We could search on that anyway. But anyway, the name I think is more commonly associated with Hawke's Bay than it is outside of the region. And it was felt that we wanted something that was fresh, a new direction. I think the directors felt that if we were going to branch out into doing new developments, we didn't want to be linked to the controversy and the issues surrounding the previous failed Ruataniwha water scheme. A lot of people have spent a lot of time demonising HBRIC for whatever purpose. It carries a lot of baggage, and we were looking for something new to move forward with. We wanted something which was Hawke's Bay, but we thought about using just Hawke's Bay Investment Company, but we felt that was sort of too old school in a way. We wanted something which was new and reflected a bicultural environment which we lived in. So we pushed the Hawke's Bay Investment Company aside, a number of other such names, and we looked at something which was new and fresh. So this is to have a new name, a new start, and a new refreshed way of operating. And the people will see it reflected in a name right from the very outset.
Bye-bye.
Does that answer your question?
I think Mare
I'm
had a
just going to go
question.
to Mare and then I'll go to you, Charlie. Thank you. Mare.
Yeah, look, I'm going to follow on from where Rick left off. This is an opportunity to kind of turn a new page. I think we all, in my mind anyway, bringing together a relationship, and whilst this is coverage for the whole of Hawke's Bay and its region, then it's nationally but internationally known Te Matau Māori. But also too, it has another context to it all in terms of left-right hand side. So, Te Matau investments, the right investment can be another pitch on this, and I think it's on point if we can get that right. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's me.
Charlie.
Yeah, I think if you take it in the context of how everyone else does in the Bay, and it actually looks like a matau. As long as you agree, Mahia's the Wairo's the head of it, all the working ends at the Cape Kidnappers. I think it's a good fit, because that's how we all look at Te Matau. It's that.
Hawke.
Yeah, from Mahi all the way around the Cape Kidnappers.
The right investment, hey, Mare.
Yeah, Te Matau, yeah, right investment company.
Any other comment before we adjourn for lunch?
Just from me, Madam Chair. I believe...
Long as we dedicate Te Matau, the whākana mai kia mātou, as long as that hook is displayed out, you won't go wrong. But one of the questions comes in, who made the decision to whakaingoa ti hoki Oh.
I participated.
I think that was going to come
It's better for us, you know, they're not, eh? It's the Kauramatus in the region, you know. Otherwise, the Hawke here, the Kai and Kapakaro, I start thinking when I get home, who the bloody hell gave them the right to? I think the explanation coming from media. You know, but yes, I think some of those things should be explained a bit clearer to let us know as members of the council who's making these, how these little Māori, ka kuhi and rotoki and Kotahi here, Mototata Kotahi, how they name these certain departments of the council. So, okay, I'll hear to it.
Chair, just to qualify my response to Uncle Hami, I didn't make the decision, but I participated in the process to support finding an appropriate name. And one of those was Te Mata. Kia ora.
Chair, just to be clear, can I clarify that decision hasn't been taken in terms of we're seeking the support of this committee and feedback from it. If you think that this is the wrong approach and you've got an alternative approach, we'd love to hear about it. So it's a proposal for for your consideration. So just to be clear,
We're having that discussion now. So, yeah, Mike.
So for me, Madam Chair, I think what I like about it is that it captures not only the region but the population, because it's not just in regards to recognising for Māori, but it's actually the whole population. So if you like, it captures not only us as Tiwi Māori, but it also captures iwi takitaki as well. And that's what I particularly like. And like Charlie, I think with regards to the branding, to identify the region, that we actually need to see part of that nap of Hawke's Bay, because that is the Matawa Māori. That is the Hawke. And it captures the region and it captures everybody in it. Sure.
And it's much better than H-prick. So you're winning already. So could any other comment, or we're going to move the recommendations 1, 2 and 3? Do we wish to endorse the new ingoa Te Mātou Investments Hawke's Bay as the Māori committee as well?
Aye.
Okay then. So we have a mover for those recommendations.
I'll move it.
Paora, Matua, moved by Paora, seconded by Matua Hami.
Matua Hami moves it, I'll say.
Other way around. Yeah. So, that more mana. For our iwi.
For our iwi, ka pai. Kia ora.
Aye.
Just
not
included
the
in that was the hook.
Yeah.
Hook to be included?
Yeah. It's got to be in that.
Maybe just a follow-up when you rebrand with the figure and colouring that it comes back here, so that we can see the pictorial part of it as well.
I really want to see.
Yeah.
Another meeting on the 7th, isn't it?
Yeah,
the suggestion was the geographic.
Can I just say, Chair, that we'll now go back and do some work on the graphics, and we'll come back with the graphics right up for you to have a look at before we finalise on that as well.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to it. Yeah. Vast improvement.
All the points to be made will be taken very careful note of.
Cool. Thank you very much. And that I'll just need to make sure everybody in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against. Carried unanimously. Let's have some lunch. So I'll get someone. Ask we get Matua.
Yeah, all right.
The lunch lady mightn't be there.
She's behind the screen.
Whakapaungi au kai now. Te māngai me ngāne hera pona te tuka tu te tapa. Whakapaungi tō mātou kai, he orunga mō tō mātou tinana. Whāngai tū tō mātou wairu, ki te taro o te ora, o te māngai anō hei tautoko mai, ai e nei au kene ai.
Ai.
Kia ora. E kai. to council committee meetings. Do you think we should would we be able to put the calendar up, or there might be we all got of us whizzing around that?
Oh, sorry.
And that is page 61. See, look, it's you, Petey. No, Leanne. We're written by Leanne.
Okay, we're actually happy to take the paper as read.
Yeah, we just got to agree on those dates, really, isn't it?
What page is it on?
61.
61. And it's just about the meeting.
Yeah, I saw the calendar.
Setting the meeting.
Put it up on that board.
So, yeah, perhaps I could just add, Chair, that you'll see on the 23rd of March, there's the proposed All Governors hui, and we've proposed another one on the 22nd of June and another one on the 3rd of August. So that's the new approach of bringing the RPC and the Māori Committee together. What we don't, I guess, yet know at this stage is whether it will make sense to do more of those joined up hui and to perhaps use either the RPC meetings, which are in there as planning committee meetings, or Māori committee meetings for some more. But I guess this program gives us options so that if you need to have more kōrero together, we can use those dates that they're there, and then if the committees have got their own business they need to do, those dates are reserved. So, yeah.
So, Marama, so we still have our Māori committee meetings as such, but there's additional meetings for the collaboration with RPC and Māori committee and councillors.
Perhaps if I could add to that, Chair, because this references back to the All of Governors meeting in December, and from that, tangata whenua from both of those, Māori Committee and Regional Planning Committee, wish to go into their own sessional discussion to actually sort of look at this whole of All of Governors process moving forward. So we've kept the Regional Planning Committee dates and the Māori Committee dates in play until such time that you've concluded your discussions, both in the Māori Committee and in the Regional Planning Committee.
Mike.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think what is proposed there is the meeting scheduling. It offers the flexibility. It offers us to have those in-depth conversations that we've been asking to be able to do. And I think, and as James pointed out, if there is a need for the Māori Committee to actually come together to actually catch up with this business or process the business that's at hand, the flexibility is there to do it. But I think what it does, this proposed schedule does do, is start to move us into the space of having those wider conversations, especially with the RPC, and leading up to the upcoming elections when we're actually going to have to also consider the Māori representation sitting at the table for those that occupy those two particular seats. So yeah, our world's changing. Not only pre-COVID, but also just our ability to engage with each other. Kia ora. So I'm certainly in favour of it.
So would you like to, any other comment? No? Would you like to move that?
Happy to move.
Recommendations 1, 2 and 3 around our scheduling of our hearing for this year. Can you have a second up, please? Matuahame, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Okay, that one's done. Okay, we're going to item 13. That's you, Petey. Māori Partnerships, Team Roles and Responsibilities, page 67. So you're going to jump a few pages. Right?
Kia ora, Chair. The paper is as it reads, but if I could just highlight some points. And one of those, and you'll see it in the paper, is recording that this committee, in terms of its long tenure, was one of the main reasons why the position that I sit in came to be. So the first part is just acknowledging the Māori Committee, its history and its perseverance to work alongside our elected councillors to bring that into the previous long-term plan. As a consequence of that, it's been developing and finding capability to ensure that it's able to follow through on those matters which you were part of, as was the RPC, during our annual planning sessions and also our long-term plan, 2021 to 2031. And so I just wanted to highlight those points there. The key question that came up at a previous meeting was in terms of the relationship manager roles. These were signalled as part of the long-term plan discussions involving yourselves as well. And I just wanted to make the point that, and I tried to articulate that in my own words in the paper, to draw a distinction between the way that our people across Hawke's Bay Regional Council work, our staff in the operational field, but also in-house. And that is, we're used to working in a particular way. I've described that as a modus operandi in terms of we get particular programs of work, we start those, we work alongside tangata whenua as part of that, but they have a sunset. They come to a conclusion and then we move on. That isn't enduring in terms of finding good relationships. And so these relationship roles are very much about, they are the ones in the north, in the central and in the southern areas who will hold our relationships warm and ready for transactional business, as I've described it, to continue. So you'll see on the structural part of the paper in front of you as to what that currently looks like. And I can add that our relationship manager in the Northern Hawke's Bay is Nathan Heath, who's doing an excellent job. He was previously the area manager as part of the Integrated Catchment Management team in the Wairoa office. Our senior advisor, Māori Partnerships, that is on hold. Melanie left on good terms because she was a single parent looking after 3 children while her husband was ensconced over in Waikato Tainui. So they've rejoined as a family. The relationships manager, central and internal, to Wairama, holds that. The internal part of that role is very much about still providing EA services to me and looking after this committee and the Regional Planning Committee. The relationship manager, Southern Hawke's Bay, we interviewed last week. Of 4, 3 excellent applicants, and we're just working through the recruitment process on that. The Kaihotu Pūtaiao Māturanga Māori position, I have an agreement in principle from our Chief Executive to bring that forward, but to hold the position that Melanie has vacated. That will be a critical position in terms of Kotahi, not to be the be-all and the know-all in terms of what Māturanga Māori is or isn't, but to be able to access that, because that information lies directly with the people in the marae and our hapu on the ground. It's finding someone who has the ability and the background to be able to bring that into our kotahi and other parts of our business. So that's a roundup in terms of what this paper is about. It's informational and one that you called for. Kia ora tata.
Kia ora.
Any questions for Peri or comments?
No, just well, Peri says we've been on a long journey from when Peri first started, and it was just good that Regional Council led out in that engagement and acknowledge Peri Mahi and your team of what you've done. And then if you look at other councils now, I suppose they've picked up on some of that, because then there's been a raft of recruitment with other councils in relation to what they're now doing. So yeah, it might have been the catalyst for other organisations to look at what they were doing. So just acknowledge the mahi you do and your team. Yep.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Peter said, just recognising the resource that Hawke's Bay Regional Council has put in into building up the capacity and capability within house to deal with our Māori issues. What I will say just in regards to the appointments is I know the importance of a good fit to the organisation, but also actually to the areas that they're working in. I think it also needs to be a good fit there. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure we don't appoint somebody that they don't work for the role, because then we don't achieve anything. And it actually sets us back a little bit. So yeah, just making sure it's a good fit both ways.
Appreciate that. That's certainly part of the best person for the job role.
Yep.
Any other? I'd just like also to add around the Mātauranga Māori position. It's something we discussed pre-hui, And that person, we talk about a fit, well, that person needs to be endorsed by our iwi. So there has to be some sort of, we need to participate in perhaps in that appointment because they've got to have, they've got to have our tautoko. It's no use getting somebody from, say, Ngaitahu to be the mātauranga Māori expert for kahungunu. Just wanted to note that.
And point taken and noted. I think the key part here is we're not looking for someone who is the Einstein on mātauranga Māori. I'm not sure whether that exists. But what we are looking for is someone who understands that, who has worked in the RMA environment, who understands how these need to be brought together in some way. So we're looking for someone who is able to work directly with our people on the ground. That's where Mātauranga Māori lies. It's about how that's woven in.
Still got to have a connection to us though, because I was thinking, oh, I really think he's talking about our area. You know, you got to have that tautoko, especially in that one. Especially in that position, I think, and yeah. When you were appointed, Piri, I understand that our chair, I think it was it before us, Mike? It was before us, eh? Was Mike?
Mike Mohi was the chair.
Yeah, so we had iwi representative and Māori, the Māori committee and regional planning committee. So we had a good coverage. Yeah.
So it just depends on the relationship manager and everything, but other Mātauranga Māori might want to participate in that one. Kia ora. So if we can get someone to receive the report. Oh, I'm
Can
sorry,
I just
hold on.
ask, Brendan and Ian were just asking that question of where do they get, they wanted some Māori input into their taki. Do they come to you?
Yes. We're part of their processes all the way through. So the interaction or the engagement with the Māori Partnerships Group across council is excellent.
What we were asking for was some input into them. How does that work?
Well, that's...
Can it work or?
Well, it's one of the reasons why the papers are actually brought here for the Māori Committee endorsement. The process that precedes that is where we're engaged in-house to offer advice that becomes part of that paper. So I put my hand up in the case of this one here around the primary industry group, where it should have been glaringly obvious to me that representation of Māori is not ever going to work. So that was something that I missed in the presentation of that paper. So
that's something we can work on, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so if someone could receive the Māori Partnerships Team Roles and Responsibilities report, and we'll move by Paula, seconded by Api. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Kia ora.
The next one is statutory advocacy update.
So look, I think we'll take this paper as read. We can ask any questions to it, but perhaps I'd just make the observation, Chair, the second item in there, the reform of the resource management system, is obviously a very big undertaking by the current government, and there's extensive consultation that lies ahead, I think. I know that they're working closely with advisors from the iwi Chairs Forum and a range of other different mechanisms to build elements of the reforms. The exposure draft went to select committee last year, introduced the concept of te oranga o te taio, and what that means in legislation is being worked through, and also what are the obligations on councils under this new legislation with respect to te tiriti. That's all being actively worked on at the moment. So expect to see some proposals from central government, and what we have in the local government engagement with central government suggested that they come out and some more regional hui. So we'll certainly let you know if we hear before you do about any dates and opportunities to continue to feed into that.
Is that item 14 we're talking about?
Item 14, yes.
Yeah, because there is a bit of kōrero around there, because that's around about support and with the document, because you're talking about a collective response, and I suppose for our taiwhānau whanganui rotu, like obviously we've got a relationship, we sit in this hui, but to say we support other councils, I would say no, because it's a different engagement process, and how you're doing collective response for all the councils. So would I say Napier City Council have to whanganui o rotu's full support? I'd say no, they don't. And my other board members can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think, I know we discussed in our meeting, so when you're talking about joint collective responses across the council, the report needs to identify that our partnership, obviously with regional council, I wouldn't say the same thing. I'm just giving that as an example. So I don't want to be in a position where our mandate's compromised. So I need to put that on the tepu, because obviously when we discussed this in the board just a couple of weeks ago, and they come back and endorse it. They said, yep, we've got a relationship, we've got a partnership, no we haven't. So in this document, we're being drawn into a collective response, and I just need to make that point
Put that
clear.
noted.
Yeah. James, so you're not committing us?
No.
Yeah, understood.
Madam Chair, that just an extension of this comment, I think, and when James talked about one of the big issues is the RMA reform. This is an area where the two branches of Māori branches of regional committee would want to caucus, and we should caucus before we get drawn into some large Zoom conference or some large conference where there are other councillors and other sorts of people there saying, what do you think is tangata whenua? So that is really any sort of early warning that there's going to be a government deputation by Zoom or person come down here. There are now two committees would request time to caucus quite heavily, because they're big issues. That's a big issue, that one.
In spatial planning, and then we touched it at the start of the meeting around we're looking at planning and subdivisional plans and all that, and we're talking about the environment and three waters and all that, and the concept. So when we're looking at those annual plans and those long-term plans, I think for Māori we're just got, and we talk about Māori, we've got to look at the Māori, we've got to look at the estuary, and then fit for purpose for some of the planning. Some of the planning we've got to be aware of at the moment with all these developments. You'll read about in the paper, just from a cultural perspective, and we all want whares, no issues about that, but if we're looking at climate change and the environment, we've got to take into consideration those aspects of the plan, because they've got to be in balance. And just with some of the developments that I've seen, if we look at water retention and all that, are they putting bladders in houses to capture water, all that type of stuff? It's just something you've got to be aware of when they're going through these planning documents, because we potentially haven't got the supply to meet the demand. So it's about thinking outside the box. So we need to send clear messages as Māori, hey, our water's a taonga, and we've got to treat it with respect, and maybe look at alternative methods for storage. And it might be a bladder system in the roof of a house, and then go, and you collect rainwater. I'm just saying. So yeah, that's something for us to be aware of.
Squirrel, save for later.
But yeah, send our messaging now. So when James is potentially having these discussions at those levels, he can say, hey, well, there is concerns raised in regards to infrastructure and meeting demand and the environment, keeping the environment fit for purpose in the future. That's me. Thank you.
Okay, everything. So I'll get someone to move that we receive and note the October 2021 Statutory Advocacy Report. Mover. Was that you, Mike? You were
Yes,
nodding
it is.
here. Mike, moved by Mike and seconded
Yep.
by Matua, Roger. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Next one is item 15, significant organisation activities. I suppose if we've got any questions we can ask you, James.
Absolutely, Chair. Just the one comment I'd make is to draw your attention to the back end of this report, which is a new addition to what you've previously seen, and this is our strategic projects register. So what we've done here is take the 18 biggest and most significant projects that are running across Council at the moment, and now reporting them through to you so you can see how they're tracking. And there's a description of what those 18 projects are at the end, if any aren't already familiar to this committee, and we'll provide those an update to each meeting so you can see how they're running. So happy to take any questions in relation to those or to any of the operational activity that's in the rest of the report.
Any questions, whānau? Oh, so there, eh? Ka pai, if I get someone to move the significant organisation activities report, we received the report. Papa Bill, moved by Papa Bill, seconded by Rosie. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. So mine items we have nil. And that's us.
Madam Chair, if we finish the formal agenda, I'd just like to commend the people who put the agenda together. This is a vast improvement over, having been a member for many years, a lot of the time the agenda had nothing to do with Māori and everything to do with the council's very complicated technical reports, and we sat for hours watching. This agenda has been all relevant to us and up to date, and so I congratulate Peter and your team and whoever put this agenda together.
I'll take it, but that's another team.
but it's a vast improvement on. So James, commend your team.
Thank the total also for including the section in our council and our other committee reports around considerations of tangata whenua that sort of probe the staff writer to answer certain questions or consider them. So I think that's been a part of the consciousness within the staff to address those items from a different perspective. Through more of a lens that they can come back to you also. So thank you for giving your time to the other staff and managers and helping along them their journey. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Ka pai. And we're going to close the meeting with our karakia, and then we're going to have the workshop. It's offline. So,
I just make a note, Chair, and that is, it'll be a long, long time before we have the second day of the second month of 2022.
Yeah, all the twos. All the twos.
22nd of.
Don't go to long.
Two of the two.
But I said 222.
And then open the fridge.
thank you, Penny, for that. And with that, Matua, can I please ask that you close our hui? Thank you, everyone. Kia ora.
Thank you, Chair.
Welcome to the Wakatoki ngā kōrero. Ko pau ki te hau, tēnei wāho ki me whakawātia hoki. Tō tātou hui roto ki tō tātou whakamoimiti, mo tō tātou hāhi. Nō reire mino he ritata. Ai te maanga me ngāne he rapone te toka turi tapu. Whakaungi mai tonu mātou ki roto ki te aro whanua. Anei hoki mātou o pōnunga, ko tai ki mū tō koutou aro. Tēnei rā mo tō koutou manākitanga. Hoi no manakitia mai nei hoki tātou, ngā me hara mai tawhiti. Ngā me tatāna hoki ki tō tātou tari, he hoki pai ai katoa hoki tātou, he wā tātou kaingama. Ai tūtaki anō ki ngā whānau a reire ki e no hoi. Ngari manakitia mai nō ki rātu kei roto ki ngā hohi pera me ngana marae kāinga. He tēnā hoktara mahati ana, a ke piki te ora, piki te kaha me te māramatanga ki rungi tēnā me tēnā o rātou. Nō re te maanga me ngāne he rapone te toka turi tapu. O ka ungi mai tonu mātou. Ki roto ki te rangi Māori ngā wā katoa. O koe ana hoki te maanga he tautoko mai. Ai nei, āka nei, ai. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Kia tātou whai o tō tātou ariki a ihu kreiti. Me te aroha o te atua. Me te whiwhinga tahi tangi, tanga tō e rua tapi. Ake. Amen. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.